Hey everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. I'm glad you're here. Before we jump into tonight's stories, if you've ever had any unexplained paranormal experiences of your own, feel free to send them to me. And if you end up enjoying this video, don't forget to leave a like. Our first story is from someone who grew up in an old house and says they've been dealing with strange activity there for years. Some of it sounds subtle, and some of it is a lot more unsettling. Let's get into the story, and I hope you sleep well tonight. Hey, thanks for listening. I've lived with strange things in my house for as long as I can remember, and at this point, I just want to talk about it honestly and see if anyone out there has any idea what I might be dealing with. I grew up in a very old neighborhood. Our house is more than a century old, and just down the street, there's an old funeral chapel. A lot of people on our block have their own stories too, so it's not just me imagining things. Weird stuff has always seemed to hang in the air around here. When I was little, I was terrified of sleeping in my own room. I didn't actually start sleeping in there regularly until I was about 14. Even as a kid, that room never felt right to me. I used to hear loud knocking coming from the wall between my bedroom and the den. Not just random taps either, but hard, deliberate pounding, like someone angry wanted to be let in. I kept trying to explain it away, telling myself it had to be an animal under the house, or something settling in the walls. Then, when I was a teenager, we had the house renovated because of storm damage, leaks, and old structural issues. My room got completely redone with fresh paint, new furniture, everything. While the work was going on, a couple of the workers told us they kept seeing a woman standing up in the attic, just watching them from above. Every time they went to check, nobody was there. They also said tools would go missing, only to turn up shoved under piles of material, and a few pieces of equipment were found damaged for no clear reason. I tried not to think too much about it, but it stuck with me. A few months after I finally started sleeping in that room, something happened that I still can't explain. One night, I heard what sounded like footsteps. I had a fan running, so at first I thought maybe the sound was just blending in with it somehow. But then I felt the mattress shift, like something had sat down on the bed. A little later, it felt like whatever it was actually laid down behind me. Then I felt slow circles being traced across my back. I froze. I was absolutely terrified. After that, I slept in my mom's room for days. Later on, something even worse happened. I woke up one night feeling something wrap around my ankle and yank hard. It happened so suddenly that I jerked my leg back on instinct. The same thing happened again another time. Both times it felt forceful, and afterward, I had bruises. That's part of why it's hard for me to brush any of this off. I've also had episodes of sleep paralysis, especially when I fall asleep on my back. I never really see a face or a clear figure, but I always feel like something is there, watching me. Sometimes it feels like it's moving around the bed. Sometimes I can feel the blanket shift, or the mattress dip like something is sitting beside me. One time, it felt like it leaned over me with both hands pressed down near my shoulders. I couldn't move, couldn't speak properly, just barely whisper. The only thing that seems to break it is when I force myself to say the name of Jesus over and over until I can move again. What unsettled me most was that it happened once when I was away from home at a church retreat, which made me wonder whether whatever this is might not be tied only to the house. Lately, I've started playing Christian music softly through the house because it brings me some comfort. I've also noticed these things seem to happen more often in the fall, especially close to Halloween. Around Christmas, everything usually feels quieter, calmer, almost like the house can finally breathe. I don't know whether I'm dealing with one presence, several, something dark, or something else entirely. I just know this is something I've grown up with. In a strange way, I'm used to it, but I still want to understand it. There are times when you can feel something enter the house, almost like the air changes and suddenly you know you're being watched. And somehow, you can feel the difference between something curious and something that feels angry, heavy, or wrong. That's really why I'm sharing this. I'm not trying to be dramatic. I just want to understand what's been around me all these years. So, let me tell you something that really unsettled me. It started early one morning while I was helping my daughter get ready for school. Our cat, who's usually totally relaxed and spends most of her time stretched out in the living room or perched by the window, suddenly slipped into my room and hid under the bed. That alone was strange. But what really got my attention was the way she was peeking out, staring toward the living room like she saw something we couldn't. My daughter noticed it too and laughed, asking why the cat was acting so weird. I tried to keep things light because I knew my reaction would shape hers, and I didn't want her getting scared. But honestly, even I felt uneasy. I don't believe in ghosts or anything like that, so I kept telling myself there had to be a normal explanation. Still, the cat wouldn't break her stare. She wasn't watching a bug or a shadow on the floor. She was locked onto one exact spot in the air. Her pupils were huge, her body low, and she looked tense in a way I'd never seen before. My daughter called her name, but she didn't even twitch. Then she started creeping forward, slowly, carefully, like she was stalking something. A second later, she backed up under the bed again like whatever she saw had startled her. Then she tried again. She moved toward the bedroom door, step by step, never taking her eyes off that same spot. And the second she crossed the doorway, her whole body changed. Her back arched, her tail puffed up, her ears flattened, and every bit of fur on her stood up. It was like watching a completely different animal. This cat has always been gentle, calm, almost ridiculously laid back. I've never seen aggression from her, not once. She kept inching forward until she got near the cracked garage door, the one that leads to her food, litter box, and cat tree. Then, suddenly she bolted into the garage and stayed there nearly the whole day. I went into the living room right after that and checked everything. Nothing was there. No movement, no noises, no shadows, no reflection from outside. The curtains were shut. It was still early, and the street outside was quiet. The whole thing gave me chills, even though I kept joking around for my daughter's sake. And the weird part is, this wasn't even the first time. A few years earlier, we had another cat, also calm and affectionate, never aggressive. One night I was downstairs watching TV while my daughter sat on the stairs petting him. Out of nowhere, he let out this horrible growl, the kind that instantly tells you an animal is terrified. I turned around and asked what happened, and she said she didn't know. She'd just been petting him when he suddenly froze and started staring up toward the top of the stairs. At the top was my son's old room. He had already moved out by then, so the room was empty and dark. That cat wouldn't look at me or my daughter. He was completely fixed on the open doorway upstairs. His fur was standing up, his body was low, and the growling just got deeper and more intense. My daughter was starting to panic, so I made the mistake of trying to pick him up and calm him down. The second I touched him, he exploded. He screamed, twisted, clawed, bit my arms, fought like he was trying to escape something far worse than me. I held on because I didn't want him tearing into my daughter, but by the time I got him into the garage and shut the door, my arms were bleeding. There was blood on the floor. And the thing is, I knew he wasn't attacking me out of aggression. He was terrified, and when I touched him, he panicked. So ever since then, I've been trying to make sense of it. I'm not really a cat expert. Truthfully, I only became a cat person because my daughter loves them. So I've wondered whether this is just one of those things cats do sometimes. Maybe they hear something in the walls. Maybe they pick up on a smell. Maybe there's some tiny sound or movement we miss. That's what I want to believe. But then I think about the other things that have happened in this house. Back when my son still lived here, I used to wake up in the middle of the night to a loud thud from the ceiling above my room, like something heavy had been dropped in his bedroom. Every time I ran upstairs, he'd be asleep in bed. After he moved out, those bangs stopped. When my daughter was little, she'd sometimes wake up screaming, and I'd find 3 thin scratches on her back that looked almost like fingernail marks. The same thing used to happen to my son, too. I never found a real explanation for that. She slept in a crib right next to me, and there was no obvious reason for those marks to appear. Even now, at 9 years old, my daughter will sometimes say she thought she saw a person out of the corner of her eye, or heard breathing behind her. Then she shrugs it off and says it's probably just her imagination, because that's what I've always taught her to think. And even with all of that, I still don't walk around feeling like the house is haunted. I've never felt a presence here. I've never been scared to be alone, never felt watched, never had that heavy feeling people talk about. Most of the time, the house feels completely normal. But then there's one more detail that keeps creeping back into my mind. When I first rented this place, my landlady told me she had lost her son to suicide. I offered my condolences, of course, but I never asked questions. It felt too personal, too painful. She had lived in this house for years and told me she loved it, which makes me wonder why she moved out and decided to rent it instead of staying. Later, she once mentioned that her son used to sneak out through his bedroom window, and the only upstairs bedroom where that would have been possible is the room my son used to sleep in, the same room above mine, the same area where I used to hear those unexplained bangs. So now, even though I still lean toward logic, I can't help connecting the dots. The scratches, the noises, my daughter's comments, 2 different cats, years apart, both reacting with pure fear to something near that same part of the house. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I do. Part of me feels ridiculous even saying it out loud, and I'm still hoping there's a completely ordinary explanation, especially for the cat behavior. Maybe there is. Maybe cats sense things we can't, but not in a supernatural way. Maybe it's scent, sound, vibration, anything. That's what I want it to be. But I'll admit this much. Every now and then, when the house gets really still, I think back on those moments and wonder whether I've been explaining away something I don't actually understand. So, this all happened a few months ago, and I still carry it with me every day. My father was diagnosed with cancer, and not long after that, he was gone. It all unfolded so quickly, faster than any of us could really process, and it left my whole family completely shaken. For a while, it felt like the ground had been pulled out from under us. I think I'm finally past the sharpest part of the grief now, or at least enough that I can talk about the strange things that happened around that time. I've always believed there are things we can't fully explain. I read tarot cards sometimes, and for me, they've always felt like a gentle, safe way to listen when something beyond the ordinary is trying to come through. I don't have every meaning memorized or anything like that, but somehow the messages usually come through clearly. About a month before we found out my father was sick, I had this awful dream about losing him. I don't even remember the details now, just the feeling. I woke up suddenly and started crying right away, like my body already knew something my mind didn't. At the time, I told myself it was just a nightmare. But then he started having a lot of pain, and after test, we learned it was cancer. The doctors were reassuring us, saying he was going to pull through, but deep down, I had this heavy feeling that he wouldn't. When I went to stay with my parents for a bit, I was mostly there to help my mom, make meals, and take care of things while my father rested at home. One day he woke up on the sofa and told us he dreamed about his own mother, my grandmother, who had passed years earlier. He said she was standing in the room with us, just watching him quietly. She didn't speak. She was simply there. And the moment he told us, that same feeling came over me again. I can't explain it, but I knew what it meant. The day before he died, I dreamed about him one more time. In the dream, we drove together to a quiet shore. The water was calm, and he stepped into a small wooden boat. He looked peaceful. Just as he was about to drift away, I woke up. Even now, I believe that was his way of saying goodbye. After he passed, I picked up my tarot deck and asked if he had a message for me. While I was shuffling, one card slipped out and landed face up, almost carefully, right in front of me. It was Temperance. And honestly, the message behind it felt almost irritatingly familiar, because it sounded exactly like something my father would have told me. Stay steady. Breathe. Don't let yourself be pulled apart by grief. Later, I went back home, and my sibling, Riley, was there. I asked whether they wanted a message too, and they said yes. I sat at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly shuffling while they finished up a chore. I must have been doing it for several minutes, just talking with my aunt, waiting. Nothing happened the whole time. Not one card fell. Then the second Riley walked up to the table, one single card jumped out and landed face up right near them. Temperance. The exact same card. And that, more than anything, felt like my father. He was such a practical, fair-minded person that part of me laughed through my tears, thinking he probably sent us the same card on purpose so neither of us could claim we got the better message. I still miss him terribly. My mother is still carrying so much pain too. But even with all of that, I'm grateful I have these moments. I'm grateful I have this story. I'm not asking anyone to explain it, and I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I just know what it felt like. And wherever he is now, I hope he knows I heard him. So, I should probably start by saying this right away. I have never been a real paranormal investigator. I have always been fascinated by that world, but I never had the money for equipment, never really knew many places nearby to explore, and honestly, I never had friends who wanted to come along for that kind of thing. I live in the northern Netherlands, in a place where there does not seem to be much of a ghost hunting scene at all. There are not many haunted locations people talk about, and you definitely do not see tours or businesses built around paranormal stuff here. Still, even without that kind of community around me, I have had enough strange experiences in my life to feel, deep down, that there really is something out there worth paying attention to. I could share those stories another time, because while they may not sound dramatic compared to famous haunted places, they felt incredibly real to me and to the people who were there with me. Anyway, the reason I am telling you all of this is because of the place where I live now. It is an old barn that was converted into 3 separate homes. The landlords live in the back section, one of their relatives lives in the front right, and I live in the front left with several other people, mostly upstairs. My room is the only downstairs bedroom in our section of the building. And this house is loud. I mean, really loud. Every floorboard, every stair, every door has a sound of its own. I can hear people going up and down the stairs. I can hear someone coming through the front door. I can hear movement from the other side of the hallway. There is even an internal route toward the landlord's side, but it goes through a long hallway, past several heavy doors and a storage space, and every single part of that route creaks and groans. At night, I make sure those doors are shut. The place honestly feels like the sort of house a horror game developer would design and then tone down for realism. The setting does not help either. The house is mostly surrounded by woods, with only a road off to one side. Across the street, there are open fields, patches of trees, and marshland. It is quiet in a way that can feel beautiful during the day, and deeply unsettling at night. What makes it stranger is that this place has always unsettled me, even before I lived here. The building survived World War II, and I would not be surprised if it had been standing long before that. It was here before the nearby town was built, before the forest behind it even existed. That land used to be farmland, and later trees were planted to create the park and woods that are there now. So this house has to be at least a century and a half old, maybe older. Not far from here, a few hundred meters away, there is a scout building where kids and teens learn outdoor skills and sometimes stay overnight. I used to go there when I was younger, and I remember so clearly how uneasy that area always made me feel. If we stayed late, especially into the night, I would get this cold, prickling feeling that I was being watched. There were no large wild animals around, nothing that should have explained it. And because I knew that forest so well, that feeling always hit me hard. So now, imagine living in the one place that creeped you out your whole childhood. For a long time, I thought maybe I had simply grown out of those experiences. As I got older, paranormal things seemed to happen less often, and I mostly stopped expecting them. But in this house, things happen that just do not feel normal. Like I said, I know what it sounds like when people move around here. Footsteps upstairs are common. Doors opening and closing are common. With so many people living nearby, it would be easy to dismiss almost anything. But there are moments that do not fit. It is not just the lights either. Sometimes the fridge door is left hanging open, and again, no one else is downstairs. I have even tested whether someone could sneak down quietly enough to avoid being heard. And honestly, I do not think it is possible. I can hear the cat padding around upstairs. I can hear him coming down the stairs. So a person making it through that space in total silence just does not make sense to me. And then there is the piano. There is a piano standing just across from that little hallway window near my room. Very occasionally, and always when the house is quiet, I hear it being played. Not a song exactly. Not random smashing of keys either. Just single notes, carefully pressed, one at a time, as though someone is trying out sounds they already know. It feels deliberate. That is what unsettles me most. Whenever I look through the window, I do not see anyone. The glass is too unclear to make out details, but I would still notice movement if somebody were standing there. And whenever I open my door and actually check, there is no one at the piano. The strangest part is that I am not the only one who has heard it. People who lived here before me have talked about the ghost piano too. Sometimes they hear it when I do not, even when I am awake in bed at the same time. That only makes it feel more mysterious, like whatever is happening does not reveal itself the same way to everyone. Even the cat seems uneasy about that hallway. He avoids it most of the time. He sleeps in different housemates' rooms all the time, but in nearly 10 months, he has only slept in mine once. Usually he only comes into my room briefly because I have a door leading outside. So that is where I am at. I really do think something is going on here. And recently, I got 3 pet rats. Since they are active at night, I started wondering whether they might react to whatever this is. People always talk about cats sensing things, but I have never heard much about rats in that context. So now I keep wondering whether they might notice something before I do, or whether their behavior could tell me when the house is active. That is really why I am sharing all of this with you. I do not know exactly what is in this house, but I know it does not feel empty. And now I am left wondering whether these little animals might end up noticing the unseen before I can. You know, I've always wondered about those strange moments when you catch something out of the corner of your eye, and for a split second, it feels completely real. But the second you turn and look straight at it, it's gone. Not hidden, not darting away, just gone. I really do wonder sometimes if we notice certain unexplained things better that way, almost sideways, instead of face to face. I'm 60 now, and until recently, this had only happened to me one other time in my whole life. I was about 11, maybe 12, and my sister and I were at home waiting for our friend Lila to come over from across the street. She had called and said she'd be over in a few minutes, so we were expecting her. I was in the family room, which faced the front of the house, and out of the side of my eye, I caught what looked like a person moving up the walkway toward the gate that led into our fenced patio. It looked so clear in that quick glance, just a human shape coming right up to the entrance. I got excited and jumped up right away because I thought I'd beat her to the gate and surprise her. I rushed out through the sliding screen door, pulled the gate open, and started to say, "Hi, Lila." And then I stopped. There was nobody there. I just stood there frozen, looking one way and then the other, completely confused. There was nowhere she could have gone that fast, not without me seeing her. My dad had been sitting in the family room too, and he'd noticed someone as well. When I came back inside, I told him no one was there. At first, he said he thought he'd seen her too, but then he brushed it off. He was never the kind of person who liked talking about anything spooky, so I could tell he didn't want to lean into it. After that, nothing like it happened again for decades. Then, just recently, it happened a second time. My husband and I have been clearing out my mother's house since she passed away last winter. One afternoon, I stepped outside to check the side walkway along the front of the house because I wanted to look at the deck. A handyman and his helper had cleaned the roof a few days earlier, and branches and bits of debris had fallen onto it. The deck sits above the lowered garage area, and as I was walking and glancing downward, I caught this quick, dark shape from the corner of my eye. It was small, fast, and low to the ground. My first thought was that it must have been a black squirrel, maybe even a bird hopping out of sight. It moved behind a wall near the family room window. So naturally, I walked faster to get a look, fully expecting to see it. That's the part that gets me. I wasn't guessing. I was sure I was about to find some little animal there. In fact, I started thinking maybe it was injured, because usually if you approach a squirrel or a bird, it bolts or flies off right away. But this thing had vanished so completely that I thought maybe it had crouched into a corner where I couldn't see it yet. But when I got there was nothing. Nothing at all. No animal, no movement, no place it could have slipped into. No gap, no opening, no crack where anything could have hidden. It should have been there, and it just wasn't. And honestly, that's the part that stays with me. That feeling when you expect, with total confidence, to see something right there in front of you. And then your heart kind of stumbles because there's just empty space. It leaves you standing there with your mouth open, trying to make sense of it. So I don't know. Maybe there is something about peripheral vision that lets us catch things we can't quite hold on to when we look directly. Or maybe the mind works in ways we still don't fully understand. But both times, it felt real enough that I still think about it. And I'd love to know, have you ever had something like that happen to you too? So this happened about 8 years after my granddad passed, and honestly, I still can't stop thinking about it. The other day, I was wandering through this quirky little market with my roommate. You know the kind of place. Lots of unusual stalls, handmade things, crystals, incense, all that. Then I spotted this one booth with a really mystical vibe. They were selling tarot decks, spell books, oils, perfumes, and even spirit boards. I was immediately drawn in. What really caught my attention was that they also offered psychic and medium readings. I've always had this deep curiosity about connecting with people who've passed on, especially my granddad. Ever since he died, I've felt like he's still around in some way. I've dreamed about him a few times over the years, and lately he'd been on my mind more than usual. I couldn't really explain why. I ended up speaking to a young woman at the stall and asking about booking a medium reading. She handed me a business card, and I tucked it away before my roommate and I kept walking through the market. A little while later, we passed by this older woman who had also been in that same stall while I was there. She suddenly stopped me and asked, "Has someone close to you passed away?" I told her, "Not recently, no, but yes, someone has." Then she looked at me and said, very calmly, "Someone is with you. It's your grandfather." I just froze. I was so shocked that I barely processed the rest of what she said. What I do remember is her telling me to get a black candle, light it, leave it burning in a room overnight, and then throw it away the next morning. I'm still not completely sure if that's exactly what she said, or if I misheard some of it, but that's what stayed with me. Then, after that, she mentioned the name Michaela. That's what made the whole thing even stranger, because I don't know anyone by that name. She warned me there was dark energy around it, told me to be careful, and said something about a dark cloud. Later, after I left the market, I looked up the psychic stall online using the business card I'd been given. And that's when I saw that the woman who does the medium readings there is named Michaela. So now I can't stop wondering what that was supposed to mean. Was it some kind of warning not to book with her? Was the woman talking about someone else entirely? Or was it all connected somehow? I don't know what to make of it, but the whole experience left me feeling shaken, curious, and honestly, a little emotional. More than anything, the part about my grandfather is what stays with me. I keep thinking there must have been a reason I ended up there that day. Lately, I've been tucked away at my grandmother's place, pretty much on my own, studying for the MCAT and getting ready to leave for an Ivy League master's program. It's been a strange season, because something this big is happening in my life, and yet, it's felt so quiet. No real celebration, no warm send-off, not even the kind of acknowledgement you hope for from the people closest to you. So in a lot of ways, I've been carrying this whole chapter by myself. A few nights ago, I had a dream that unsettled me at first, but the more I sat with it, the more it felt less like a random dream and more like a mirror. It reflected my life so clearly that it honestly left me shaken. In the dream, I was in my grandmother's house, the same house I'm in now, and there was a djinn circling around me, moving fast, almost hovering, always near me but never actually able to touch me. What stayed with me was my reaction. I didn't panic. I didn't run. I just started reciting prayers over and over, steadily, like something in me already knew what to do. Every time I did, it would pull back, disappear, and then reappear somewhere else, until eventually it kept retreating into the bathroom. And that part really struck me, because in Islam, we understand that impure places, especially bathrooms, are places where shayateen are drawn. So it didn't feel like it was hiding out of power. It felt like it was being pushed back, forced into the place it belonged, because the dhikr was stronger than it. At one point in the dream, I called my family. They told me I'd be fine. But they were somewhere else, at my uncle's house, far away, comfortable, uninvolved. They weren't coming to help me. They were just distant voices telling me I'd survive it. And that part hurt, because it felt a little too familiar. That's exactly what this season of my life has been like. People knowing I'm struggling, maybe even believing I'll make it through, but not actually showing up. Then, just as I was finally leaving the house, the djinn made one last attempt. It changed form and took on the face of my younger sister. That was the part that really got me, because my younger siblings are my heart. They are the people I love most fiercely. I've helped raise them in so many ways. They're the deepest thread connecting me to home. And the djinn in the dream didn't use that face at the beginning. It waited until I was already on my way out. It was like the dream understood something very specific about me. Fear won't stop me. Loneliness won't stop me. But guilt might. The thought of leaving behind the people I love, especially the younger ones, that's the thing that can still reach me. And even then, I kept walking. The dream ended with me arriving at a hospital. That part almost made me laugh when I woke up, because I'm working toward becoming a doctor. Out of everything my mind could have chosen, that's where I arrived. After the fear, after the isolation, after the spiritual fight, I didn't end up lost. I ended up at the place connected to my calling, and the more I thought about it, the more meaningful it felt. Islamically, we're taught that Shaitan presses harder when someone is close to something real, something good, something transformative. So the fact that the attack came in my place of refuge, the fact that it circled me without ever being able to harm me, the fact that it saved its hardest blow for the face of someone I love, all of that felt deeply symbolic. No one celebrated me in that dream. No one came to rescue me. I fought the whole thing alone, with no audience, no comfort, no witness. But I still won. And then I walked straight into a hospital. I can't fully explain why it hit me so hard. It just felt important. Like I was being shown that even in the loneliness, even in the silence, even when nobody is clapping for me, I am still being guided. I am still being protected. And I am still moving toward exactly where I'm meant to go. I want to tell you about something that's been happening in my grand's house, because, honestly, I still can't make sense of it. She's gone into hospital recently, and it's very likely she won't be coming back home. If she does leave hospital, it'll probably be to palliative care. So as you can imagine, it's been a really heavy, emotional time for all of us. Because of that, my aunt, my mom, and my dad have been taking turns staying at her house. Just keeping an eye on things, being there, making sure the place still feels lived in. In the sitting room, my gran has this little glass bowl on a side table where she always kept sweets. The first person to stay there alone was my aunt. She told us that every time she filled the bowl with wrapped boiled sweets before bed, they were gone by the next morning. Completely gone. Not just a few missing, all of them. Wrappers too. It happened more than once, so she started trying to rule things out. At one point, she even draped bits of cotton across the doorways because she wondered if she might somehow be getting up in her sleep and doing it without realizing. But the cotton stayed undisturbed, and the sweets still disappeared. Then my mom stayed there on her own and decided to try the same thing. Exactly the same thing happened to her. She actually took a photo of the bowl at night and another one the next morning, just so nobody could say she'd imagined it. After that, it was my dad's turn. And my dad is the most practical, skeptical person I know. He doesn't jump to wild conclusions, ever. He was a little uneasy about trying it, but he still did. I was there when he placed the sweets in the bowl, and I even helped him arrange them. By morning, they were gone again. Every single one. Wrappers and all. And that's why I'm telling you this, because I genuinely do not know what to think. There's no sign of pests in the house, at least none that we know of. And even if there were, it still wouldn't explain why something would keep going specifically for those sweets in that one bowl. when there are other snacks and treats elsewhere in the house. What makes it feel even stranger is the history of that place. 3 members of my family died in that house. No one else has, as far as we know. My grandparents bought it new back in the 1950s, so it isn't like there's some long, unknown history attached to it. Just ours. And every one of those people was kind, loving, and deeply family-oriented. Apparently, my dad's step-granddad, who died there when my dad was in his early 20s, had a real sweet tooth. He absolutely loved sweets. And I keep wondering, in this quiet little corner of my mind, whether, if it is something paranormal, maybe it isn't meant to frighten anyone. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's meant as a distraction or a strange little comfort during a time that's otherwise full of grief and worry. There's one detail that really sticks with me too. When my aunt put sweets in the bowl and then left the house, and my dad stayed there afterward, the sweets didn't disappear during his stay. They only seemed to vanish when the person who placed them there was the one spending the night. That's the part I can't stop thinking about. It almost feels like there are conditions to it. Like the sweets have to be given by the person staying there. Almost like it only works if it's some kind of offering. I've always been a pretty skeptical person. I'm not someone who startles easily, and I usually reach for a sensible explanation before I even entertain the idea of anything paranormal. But there's one experience from about 15 years ago that still stays with me, and no matter how many times I've turned it over in my mind, I've never been able to explain it away. I was 19 then, expecting my first child, and I just moved into my first home with my partner. The house was incredibly old, a creaky old Tudor place with a strange, almost maze-like layout. The staircase sat right in the middle of the house, and upstairs split off in 2 different directions. To get to the bathroom, you had to walk straight through our bedroom. The whole place had a heavy kind of atmosphere to it, though at the time I told myself that was just part of living somewhere with so much history. From the start, there were little things that felt odd. Our cats would sit in the downstairs hallway and stare at nothing, completely fixed on some point we couldn't see. Sometimes they'd hiss or suddenly bolt like something had spooked them. Doors would ease open by themselves with a long creak. I explained it all away. Drafts, old wood, loose latches. I didn't want to make more of it than that. One evening, though, the cats were especially unsettled. They were both focused on the hallway again, tense and alert, like they were watching someone standing there. I remember feeling that quiet little twist of unease in my stomach, but I ignored it and carried on with the night. Later on, my partner and I went upstairs to get ready for bed. We were both in the bathroom together, brushing our teeth, washing our faces, doing all the ordinary bedtime things. Nothing seemed unusual, nothing felt out of place. We got into bed, and a little while later, maybe 10 minutes or so, I remembered I'd forgotten to refill the water bottle I kept beside me at night. So I got up and went back into the bathroom. The second I stepped inside, I saw it. There was a small puddle on the floor that looked exactly like fresh blood. I just froze. It hadn't been there before. I know that with absolute certainty because we had both been standing in that room only minutes earlier. There is no way either of us could have missed it. My first thought was that it must have come from me somehow, so I checked myself straight away, but there was nothing. No cut, no scratch, nothing at all. I called for my partner, and we checked him too. Then we checked the cats. Nothing. No injuries, no sign of bleeding, nothing that could account for what we were seeing. Whatever it was had simply appeared in that room in less than 10 minutes. We cleaned it up because what else do you do? But I remember lying awake afterward, deeply unsettled, trying to reason it out. Maybe one of the cats had been sick and it only looked like blood. Maybe something had somehow been tracked in without us noticing. But none of those explanations really held up, because the floor had definitely been clear when we were in there together. Even now, all these years later, I still can't tell you what that puddle really was, where it came from, or how it appeared so suddenly. I had other strange experiences in that house too, but that one has never left me, because there was just no logical cause I could ever pin to it. And honestly, I'm still a skeptic. I still believe most things have an explanation. But that night, that one moment in that old house, is the reason I always pause before saying there's no such thing as the paranormal. So I want to tell you about what happened to me and my siblings in this house we lived in when I was a kid. I should mention this first because it matters to how I understand everything. I'm Muslim, so I don't believe in ghosts or spirits the way some people do. I believe in jinn. That's always been the framework I had for these kinds of things. I was about 11, maybe 12, when we moved into this new house. It had 3 floors, and the top floor was more like a rooftop level with high walls around it, which is pretty common in a lot of Middle Eastern homes. I'll start with what I experienced, because compared to my siblings, mine felt smaller, but still unsettling. A lot of nights, I would hear footsteps on the roof. Not soft footsteps either. I mean heavy stomping, like someone was pacing back and forth above us. Sometimes it sounded like full-on running, fast and aggressive. And the strange part was, I knew no one was up there. It wasn't just me hearing it either. My siblings heard it too. Then there was this other thing that happened almost every day, usually around sunrise and around sunset. We'd hear this loud bang, like metal being struck hard. It was such a specific sound that after a while, it almost felt like some kind of signal, like something announcing it was time to leave or come back. One moment that really stayed with me happened while I was sitting in my room reading. Out of nowhere, the door swung open sharply, and a cup of water tipped over and spilled. I still remember how sudden it was. No warning, no reason. Another thing that used to happen was I'd hear my mother calling my name, clear as day. I'd go to her, and she'd look at me and say, "I didn't call you." That happened more than once. And there was this long hallway in the house. Every time I walked through it, I had this awful feeling that someone was right behind me. Back then, I tried to brush it off and tell myself it was just my imagination. But looking back now, I really think something in that house was playing with us. My sister Layla had her own experience too. We had this big, heavy wooden board in the yard. It was one of those thick planks we sometimes balanced between 2 walls to make a swing, but most of the time it just stayed on the ground. One day she was looking out the window into the front yard, and she saw that wooden plank moving on its own, just shifting by itself. When she told me that, it clicked, because I had noticed before that it never seemed to stay in the same place. Sometimes I'd even hear it scraping along the ground, like someone was dragging it. She also heard the stomping and the banging from time to time. Then there was my older brother Kareem. He was very protective of his room. Nobody was really allowed in there. He told me about this one day when everyone else was out. He went into his room, plugged in the TV, watched it for a while, and when he finished, he unplugged it and closed the door behind him. But as he was walking away, he heard the TV come back on. He said he didn't stop to investigate. He just ran straight out of the house and into the street. My other brother had one of the scariest experiences of all. He usually slept in the guest room out in the front part of the house. One night, he woke up around 2 or 3 in the morning and saw what he described as a baby's head floating toward him. Even repeating that now feels disturbing. He said he panicked so badly, he jumped from one side of the room to the other, then ran outside and stayed in the street until sunrise because he was too terrified to go back in. We lived in that house for about 5 years. And honestly, I'm sure even more happened there than what I've told you. These are just the things we still remember. Sometimes I wonder whether we forgot the rest naturally, or whether some part of us just doesn't want to remember. You know how certain months carry memories back to you without warning? March does that to me. Every time it comes around, I remember something that happened in March of 2007, and even now, I still can't explain it. Back then, the three of us used to study together all the time. Two of my friends were cousins, and the house we studied in belonged to their family. It was usually empty, so it became our quiet little place for exam prep. Nothing fancy, just a plain old house with 2 rooms, a wide hall in the middle, a veranda out front, and a gate that opened onto the road. One night, the three of us decided to sleep there after studying late. 2 of us stayed in one room, and the other slept in the second room. I wasn't really asleep. I had this habit of lying awake long after everyone else drifted off, so that night I was just lying there with my eyes shut, half listening to the silence. Sometime after midnight, I heard footsteps in the hall. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just ordinary footsteps. But then the sound changed. It turned into this strange, light, skipping noise, almost like a small child hopping around. What made it worse was the sound itself. It had that soft squeak to it, like those little sandals kids wear, the kind that chirp when they walk. The sound crossed the hall slowly, then moved toward the veranda, and then seemed to go outside. But every door had been shut. I stayed completely still under my blanket, my face covered, pretending I was asleep. I was sweating, but I didn't dare move. Then something else happened. I heard the door to the other room open. One of my friends came out. At least, I thought it was him. But he didn't come into my room, and I didn't hear him step outside either. So I lay there thinking, if he's not in his room, and he's not here with us, then where is he? Still, I didn't look. After a little while, I heard him come into my room. Then came the click of the switch, and the light turned on. I could sense someone standing there for a few moments. I don't know how to explain that feeling, but you know when you just know someone is in the room with you? I felt that. I kept my eyes shut. Then the light went off again. A bit later, I heard doors opening, one after another. It sounded like all of them. Then whoever it was went outside. Maybe 15 minutes passed, maybe a little more. Then I heard the same person return. This time I could hear each door being shut again from outside, one by one, carefully, before the footsteps went back into that other room and the door closed. I thought maybe it was over. Maybe I had imagined part of it. Maybe I was just tired. But after some time, the sounds came back. The footsteps again. And that same squeaky, uneven, childlike sound. Only this time, they didn't go out to the veranda. They just stopped. That was somehow worse. The friend sleeping beside me never woke up through any of it. Not once. And somewhere before dawn, I must have finally fallen asleep too. The next morning, I asked my friend where he had gone in the middle of the night. He looked at me like I was the one saying something strange. He told me he had never left his room. Then he said, even if he had been sleepwalking, how would he have opened the doors, switched the light on and off, and moved around like that? That answer stayed with me, and the 2 friends who were with me that night were related to her. I want to tell you about something that happened a few years ago on a family holiday, and honestly, it still unsettles me when I think about it. We used to stay in this coastal town all the time. Family friends had a little apartment there, up on a hill, and we'd been visiting for years and years. It was the kind of place that always felt familiar, safe, almost routine. That's probably why what happened stood out so sharply. Nothing even remotely like it had ever happened before. That afternoon, my mom and I had walked down into town to grab some takeaway, and on the way back we were making our way up the hill toward the apartment. It was a normal residential road, houses on both sides, nothing unusual about it. Then I noticed this older woman stepping out from her front gate, maybe 50 yards ahead of us. She just stopped and stared uphill. At first, I didn't think much of it. There were a couple of people walking down toward her, so I assumed she was watching them. But when they passed, she didn't react at all. She just kept staring straight up the road, almost blankly, like she was fixed on something that wasn't there. As my mom and I walked past, she didn't really look at us either. She just stayed in that same strange state. We kept going, and after a few seconds, I turned around to check if she was still doing it. She was. Only now she was waving. Not at us, not at anyone I could see, just waving up the hill at nothing. I remember trying to brush it off. I told myself maybe she was confused, maybe she was elderly and not fully with it. Maybe there was some explanation I just couldn't see. Strange, yes, but explainable. But later that evening is where it got harder to shrug away. It was probably around 8:30, maybe a little later. I'd gone back out with my mom and my sister to head into town again, this time to the local shop. I remember specifically asking if we could avoid that same road because I really didn't want to pass that woman's house again. So we took a different lane. This other route was quieter, with a converted barn house along the way. Outside it, there was a family, 2 teenagers messing around in the yard while their parents stood nearby. As we got close, the mother, younger woman this time, maybe mid-30s, suddenly went completely still and started staring down the lane. It was the exact same kind of stare. Distant, unblinking, like she'd tuned out the world around her. I remember her daughter trying to say something to her, trying to get her attention, and she just didn't respond. She ignored her completely. And right then, I got that horrible feeling in my stomach because it felt too familiar, too specific. We walked past, and once again, I turned around. She was waving. I swear to you, she was waving the same way the first woman had. Calmly, casually, toward a stretch of road where there was nothing to wave at. No person, no open view, nothing. Just a wall, some stonework, and the side of an old building. By then, I was deeply rattled. The odds of seeing 2 different people, in 2 different places, doing the exact same bizarre thing on the same evening, it just got under my skin. It felt staged almost, like reality had glitched for a second, and I was the only one noticing. We carried on to the shop, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was anxious the whole time, trying to make it make sense. Then, when we came back out, it somehow got even worse. And what bothered me was this. She lived ridiculously close by. She could have walked there in 2 minutes. Why drive? Why stop right beside us instead of parking properly? Why look so thrown when she saw me? None of it made sense. Not separately and definitely not all together. I know there are people who would probably hear this and say there has to be some ordinary explanation. Maybe there is. But when you're the one standing there, watching these moments unfold one after another, it doesn't feel ordinary. It feels wrong. It feels like the world slips half an inch sideways and suddenly nothing lands where it should. That whole night stayed with me for years. It got tangled up with a lot of anxiety I was already carrying, and I think that's part of why it never really left me. Even now, I can still picture those women standing there, staring into empty space, then lifting a hand and waving at something I couldn't see. And I still don't know what to do with that. So this happened a while back, and honestly, it still lingers in my head more than I'd like to admit. A buddy of mine invited me out one evening and said he wanted me to meet a few people he'd been hanging around with lately. Nothing strange about it, just one of those casual, go-with-the-flow nights. When I got there, he introduced me to everyone. It was him and 3 other people. We spent the night wandering around town, talking, stopping here and there, doing the usual aimless stuff people do when nobody has a real plan. At first, everything felt completely normal. But here's the part I still can't make sense of. I could have sworn there was another person with us. A guy named Elias. At the time, I didn't question it at all. He just seemed like part of the group. What stood out, though, was that he only ever talked to me. Not once do I remember him really speaking to anyone else. Back then, I just figured maybe he was shy, or maybe he didn't know the others that well yet. But we didn't just exchange a few words. We actually talked. Full conversations. Joking around, making little comments about people passing by, saying random things that made the walk more fun. I remember laughing with him. I remember him being right beside me for most of the night, like he'd been there the whole time. And yet, when I look back on it, I can't remember anyone else acknowledging him. No one answered him. No one looked at him. No one really reacted to him at all. I didn't realize how unsettling that was until the next day. My friend made a group chat so we could all hang out again sometime. I looked at it, and there were only 5 people in it. Me, my friend, and the 3 others he'd introduced me to. So I asked where Elias was. They all looked confused. Nobody knew who I meant. I tried to explain. I described what he looked like, reminded them that he'd been walking with us the whole night, told them about the conversations we'd had. But they just kept saying the same thing. It had only been the 5 of us. My friend even insisted he'd introduce me to everyone who was there. And that's the part I still can't shake. I know what it's like to misremember something small, but you don't just imagine hours of talking to someone. You don't laugh with a person, walk beside them all night, and then find out nobody else even remembers they existed. There were no messages from him, no photos, nothing at all. It was like he had never been there in the first place. What unsettles me most is that he only spoke to me. It was almost like he wasn't really part of the group at all. Like he was just there for me and no one else. I've tried to come up with some reasonable explanation, but none of them ever feel right. And every now and then, I still think about that night and wonder who or what I was talking to. I want to tell you about something that happened when I was a kid, maybe 7 or 8 years old, sometime in the mid-1990s. My mom, Marla, drove this huge old station wagon, the kind that felt more like a bus than a car. We were a big family, so that thing was always full of people, snacks, blankets, and noise. That summer, we were staying out on my great-grandmother's land, way out in the middle of nowhere. The property had a house, power, running water, all of that, but it was still a long way from town, probably around half an hour or so depending on how fast you drove. You didn't just run out for something. Going anywhere took planning. One evening, my cousin Jenna wanted a soda, and my mom was already heading into town to pick up my uncle from work, so she said we could all go. It started out like any other summer night. It was late, probably close to 10, fully dark, the kind of dark you only get in the country, where there are no streetlights and no neighbors nearby. My grandmother's place sat about 2 miles off the main road, and the dirt road in and out was so familiar to us that we barely thought about it. But about halfway down that road, my mom got what she later called a strange feeling. Not panic exactly, just that sudden, heavy sense that something wasn't right. She told us to lock the doors, which was unusual enough that I still remember it clearly. My cousin was in the front passenger seat, and I was sitting behind her in the back. When we reached the stop sign at the main road, my mom slowed down and looked both ways like always. No cars, no headlights, nothing strange that I could see. But instead of pulling out, she just sat there. I remember being confused. She was staring out the passenger side window, completely still. Then Jenna looked over too, and she froze. I leaned toward my own window to see what they were looking at, and that's the part I can still picture, in a way that gives me chills. I couldn't see anything outside my window. Not darkness in the normal sense. It was more like the window had been covered over. Just solid black, like something was blocking every bit of light. And I've always had pretty good night vision, so I knew this wasn't ordinary. Usually, even at night, you can still make out the roadside, shapes, the reflection from headlights, something. But this was different. It was just blank. Then we heard it. Something tugged on the handle of my door. Right there, right beside me. The sound was clear enough that there was no mistaking it. And the second that happened, Jenna started screaming, and my mom slammed on the gas and shot onto the main road. She drove fast, faster than I'd ever seen her drive, and she didn't slow down until we got to the gas station where my uncle was working. When we pulled in, my mom and Jenna jumped out and ran inside to get him. I stayed in the car. We had just come off that dusty road, and even after the stretch of pavement, the outside of the wagon was still coated in a layer of dirt. Nobody had touched the car since we left the property. When my uncle came back out, I got out too, and that's when we saw the marks. Around the handle on my back door, the dust had been rubbed away, like someone or something had grabbed it and tried to pull it open. On the roof above that same side, there was a handprint. Not just a smudge, a real print. And it looked wrong. The fingers seemed too long, almost claw-like. Near the back fender, there were 4 deep scratches through the dust, sharp enough that they had scored into the paint. Some people threw out Bigfoot because we were in Oregon, but then dismissed it just as fast because we lived in the high desert, like that settled the matter. That explanation never satisfied me anyway. What has always stayed with me most is this. My mom was terrified. My cousin was terrified. But I wasn't. Not really. I knew something strange had happened, and I knew something had come up to that car and tried to get in, but I never felt like it wanted to hurt me. That sounds odd, I know, but it's the truth. I felt like it was trying to reach me, specifically me, and my mom somehow sensed it before any of us saw a thing. Even now, all these years later, my mom and my cousin have never changed their story. Not once. They still swear that what they saw was real. Most of the family still doesn't believe them, and honestly, whenever someone shrugs it off, I always come back to the same question. If they didn't see what they say they saw, then who put the handprint on the car? You know, even now, I still hesitate before telling this story out loud, because part of me wants to laugh it off, and part of me remembers exactly how terrified I was. This happened during my first year of diploma, when I was 16 and living away from my family for the first time. The hostel I stayed in was outside the main campus, maybe 25 minutes away, and all the first-year girls were kept there separately. I think it was supposed to protect us from ragging, but honestly, it just felt like we'd been dropped into a place no one else wanted. My room was on the ground floor, right near the security area, the very first room in the whole building. For the first few weeks, everything felt normal. I was adjusting, missing home, trying to act braver than I felt. Then, sometime in the second month, I started waking up at strange hours, almost always around 3:20 in the morning. One night I opened my eyes and saw something standing near the door. It was tall, much taller than a normal person, maybe 7 feet or close to it. Completely dark. No face I could make out, no eyes, just a shape. Broad shoulders. Still. Watching. My bed faced the door directly, so there it was, the first thing in front of me. My mother had once told me that if I ever saw something I couldn't explain, I should never react to it. So I did the only thing my frightened 16-year-old brain could do. I pulled the blanket over my head like that would solve anything, and lay there until I fell back asleep. The next night, I woke up again at nearly the same time. It was there again. Only this time, it seemed closer, like it had moved further into the room, near my roommate's bed. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I turned to face the wall and told myself, very firmly, that I would not be participating in whatever that was. Around the same time, strange sounds started becoming normal for everyone in the hostel. Girls in rooms near the staircase said they heard footsteps running up and down the stairs late at night, fast and heavy, like someone was racing between floors. It was a 4-story building, and the way they described it, it sounded impossible. The ground floor girls, including us, heard something else. Furniture dragging, chairs scraping, beds shifting, tables being moved across the floor in the middle of the night, like someone was rearranging rooms we couldn't see. Eventually, our floor monitor called everyone together and demanded to know who was making the noise. She also asked something even stranger. She said, "And who is this boy everyone keeps crying for at night?" She used a name, not the real one, of course, but let's call him Moran. That was the strange part. None of us knew any Moran. We thought maybe the senior students upstairs were fooling around. They thought we were the ones making the noise. But the diploma girls mostly stayed on the ground floor. The engineering students were on the first floor, and we barely even interacted. No one had a reason to play games like that. Everyone kept denying it, and in the middle of all that tension, I made the mistake of joking that maybe the place was haunted. The problem was, the second I said it, everyone went quiet. Then everyone started panicking, including me. That night, my roommates and I decided we weren't sleeping alone in our room. We grabbed our pillows and blankets and went to the last room in our wing, where 3 of our classmates stayed. 5 girls packed into one room felt safer than 2 girls alone with their imagination, or whatever else it was. Sometime during the night, we heard knocking. Not loud, just 2 slow knocks on the door. No one moved. No one answered. By morning, we all acted like nothing had happened. That was the rule in that hostel. Whatever happened at night stayed there. But things kept spiraling. There was a girl from the other wing, about my age, who had been struggling badly. More than once, she ran toward the top floor saying she wanted to jump, and we had to physically stop her. My older roommate, who was a couple of years ahead of us emotionally, if not academically, was almost like a big sister. The girl's mother even called us and asked if her daughter could switch into our room, hoping a calmer environment would help. For a brief moment, it seemed like the exchange would happen. Then, within the hour, the whole thing turned into hostile drama. Accusations, tears, complaints, people twisting what had been said. It was exhausting, and honestly, that chaos was almost scarier in a different way, because now it wasn't only the nights that felt unstable. The days did too. One night, another roommate went outside after arguing with her mother on the phone. She left upset, sometime after midnight. A while later, I heard someone crying. Not just briefly, proper crying, hurt crying. It went on long enough that I finally got up to look for her. I checked the staircase, the open hallway, different corners of the floor. The crying seemed to grow louder the more I searched, but I still couldn't find anyone. When I finally came back to the room, she was already inside. I asked where she had been. She said, very casually, "On the stairs." I told her I had checked the stairs. Then she said something that made the whole thing worse. She said she hadn't been crying at all. Angry? Yes. Crying? No. At that point, I honestly started wondering if fear was changing what I heard. But then, the physical things started. Night after night, I'd feel a sudden tug while sleeping, like something was pulling me downward from the bed. Not enough to drag me all the way off, just enough to jerk me awake in panic. Every time I looked around, there was nothing there. And then there was the mirror. I used to walk around the room listening to music, just pacing to calm myself. A few times, when I glanced into the mirror, I saw what looked like a small shadow on the bed behind me. It moved when I moved, not exactly copying me, but staying in rhythm with me. After a while, I stopped trying to make sense of it. I just avoided being alone with the mirror for too long. Eventually, I called a senior who had lived in that hostel the year before. I asked her plainly whether anything strange had happened there when she stayed. That night, she said no. The next morning, I ran into her near the library. We exchanged normal greetings, and then she looked at me and asked, almost casually, "Did you see a shadow figure? Something that looked like it hugged someone from behind?" I remember just staring at her. Then she told me that girls from her batch had seen odd things too. While recording a reel once, one of them later noticed something dark behind a girl in the video, almost like it was leaning in close. Others had heard dragging sounds, footsteps on the stairs, blankets lifting on their own. Her boyfriend tried to add stories from the boys' hostel, but by then I had heard enough for one lifetime. That same night, my roommate and I decided we would stay awake and prove to ourselves that we were imagining everything. That was a terrible idea. At some point, I saw it again. I didn't even trust my voice, so I texted her from my bed. "Do you see it?" She replied, "Ignore it." That response chilled me more than the figure. She sent me a devotional song link and told me to listen to it and sleep. Neither of us said the words directly, but we both knew what we had seen. He warned us not to go near that room. He said that whatever was there moved from that space into ours. Then, he asked for our names and birth dates, checking whether any of us seemed especially vulnerable. For me, he said there was nothing attached. For another girl, he sounded much less certain. Then, he said something that silenced all of us. He said, "Someone is crying there." And the reason, according to him, was tied to a boy. Not Moran, not really, but close enough to the name people kept hearing whispered in the night. He told us there had been tragedy there before us. A death. Grief that never settled. Stories buried under the building. Unfinished lives. Unrest that had never been put to peace. I don't know what was true and what was fear feeding on rumor. I really don't. What I do know is that he repeated one instruction again and again. Do not step down from your bed at night. So we didn't. We sat together until morning, like children pretending dawn could fix everything. The strangest part is that life still continued. We still studied. We still went to class. We still gossiped, argued, borrowed notes, worried about exams. That's what feels surreal when I think back on it. We were living ordinary student lives right in the middle of something that felt deeply not ordinary. I don't stay there anymore. I'm in my final year now, but I still hear stories from juniors in that same room. One of them said she felt herself being pulled while sleeping. Another said she saw figures that looked like people she knew. So the room still carries that reputation. And maybe there are logical explanations. Hello to everyone watching the Paranormal M channel. Welcome back. Join us as we dive into real paranormal experiences from around the world. Thanks so much for your continued support and for sending in so many incredible stories. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Now get into bed, put on your headphones, switch on your nightlight, and let's listen to tonight's paranormal experiences. Good night. So this happened when I was about 14, and I was out with my two older brothers, Eli, who was 16, and Gage, who was 17. My grandparents had this big stretch of land with a couple horses and some cattle. I wouldn't call it a full-on ranch, but honestly, it kind of was one, in everything but the name. There was a spot we loved down by the river where we'd go to mess around, shoot rifles sometimes, build little campfires, just hang out and feel like the whole world belonged to us. But this particular day, we'd brought our bows instead. To get to our usual river spot, the easiest way was to cut through a gate into the neighboring property and follow this narrow, forested trail. The problem was, my grandpa had been dead serious about us not going that way. He was in the middle of a nasty feud with the neighbor. Property lines, respect, the whole thing. Technically, the trail was on the other guy's land, even though it was the cleanest route and shaved off a good 15 or 20 minutes. And look, we weren't dumb. We knew we shouldn't. But we were kids, and kids are experts at convincing themselves rules are flexible. Still, I remember something really specific before we even got going. I got this weird feeling, not fear exactly, more like awareness. Like the woods were paying attention. Like there were eyes on us in a way that didn't make sense. The crazy part is, we'd taken that trail plenty of times and I'd never felt that before. But that day, it was like my skin knew something my brain didn't. We went anyway. We got to the river spot, and for a while everything was totally normal. We shot for a bit, joked around, retrieved arrows, did all the usual brother stuff. Light trash talk, pretending we were better shots than we were. Then the sun started to sink, and once that light changes in the woods, everything goes from warm and familiar to sharp, shadowy, like the forest turns its face away from you. We packed up and started back. The trail felt darker than usual, like the trees were leaning in. I told myself I was just being dramatic, but my stomach didn't buy it. About halfway back, we stopped because I had to pee and, yeah, being a girl in the woods means it's not as simple as turn around and go. I had to squat near a tree and try not to be annoyed about it. My brothers stepped a little ways off, giving me the world's most impatient version of privacy. And right as I was fixing my clothes and standing back up, we heard it. A deep, ugly growl, loud enough that it didn't feel like it was coming from far away. And then, almost immediately after, that sickening crack of wood splitting. Not a twig, not brush, a solid tree limb, big enough to make the sound carry like a gunshot. Then we heard hooves pounding through the tree line. Hooves. That's the part that still doesn't sit right, because our brains went straight to the obvious explanation. Horse. Cow. Something got loose. Wouldn't have been the first time. But none of us stayed long enough to see what it was. We grabbed what we could and ran. And when I say ran, I mean full panic. No pride, no jokes, no pretending we were tough. Just 3 kids booking it down a dark trail like something was on our heels. We ended up ditching half our gear without even thinking about it. We hit the gate, and we practically slammed into it. Eli started fumbling with the chain, hands shaking so bad he kept missing the latch. Gage was scanning the woods like he expected something to burst out any second. And I was just standing there, breathing too hard, trying to listen over my own heartbeat. And that's when we saw it. At first, my brain tried to label it as a person. That was the only category it wanted to use. But it was wrong. Too tall, too still, too shaped in a way that didn't feel human. And then I saw what made my blood go cold. Horns. Not huge, like a cartoon demon or anything, but unmistakable, curving up from its head in a way that caught what little light was left. And the eyes. I swear to you, the eyes looked red, like someone had taken 2 coals and pressed them into a face. Eli was the only one who actually said something out loud. His voice cracked when he did, like he didn't even recognize his own words. He just whispered, "What is that?" None of us answered. We couldn't. He got the chain on the gate, and we backed away without turning our backs on it, moving fast, half stumbling, heading straight for the barn like it was the only safe place left on earth. We made it back, and my grandpa, he didn't fully believe us, but he also didn't laugh. He had that tight, thoughtful look, like he was filing it away somewhere. Like maybe he'd heard enough in his life to know that sometimes people see things they can't explain. My grandma didn't really respond at all, just went quiet and busy, the way some folks do when they don't want a thing to exist. Engage? My oldest brother didn't say anything. Not that night. Not the next day. Not for years. It was like he refused to give it reality by putting words on it. Here's where I land on it now. I believe in the supernatural, but I also believe in the rational. I'm not someone who wants every weird noise to be a monster. Most things have explanations. Animals, shadows, adrenaline, the way fear edits memory. But I can't neatly box this one. Because even if I can explain the growl and the branch snap and the hooves, there's still that figure in the clearing. The horns, the eyes. And there's one more thing that makes it harder to ignore. My grandparents always claimed that on the neighboring property there was an old indigenous ceremonial mound, a place used a long time ago for gatherings or rituals. I've never seen it myself, and I can't prove it's real. It's just something they said with a strange seriousness, like you didn't argue with it. Maybe it has nothing to do with anything. Maybe it was an animal and our fear filled in the blanks. Or maybe, just maybe, we were somewhere we weren't supposed to be, at a time of day when the woods stopped feeling like they belonged to people, and something noticed us noticing it. I honestly don't know. All I know is that I still remember that clearing, that gate, and that feeling, like the dark was watching back. So, this happened when I was about 7 or 8. Old enough to notice when something feels off, but still young enough that my memories from that time come in these little broken flashes, like snapshots instead of a full movie. My cousin Maddie and I were playing upstairs at my grandparents' house. And I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened. That entire upper floor has always had this unsettling feeling, like the air is heavier up there. My older brother used to stay upstairs for a while, and even now he'll tell you the same thing, that the creepiest energy was strongest on that floor, especially around one specific room. Upstairs had a few rooms, and each one had its own kind of wrongness. There was this huge bedroom, almost too huge, like the size didn't match the shape of the house. That's where my brother stayed. Then there was the old childhood room, where my mom and her brother slept when they were kids. That room felt heavy in a way I can't really explain, like it was carrying old emotions in the walls. It was packed with their old toys, still sitting there like someone might come back and start playing any second. And later, years later, my mom's brother disappeared. Not like lost touch. I mean vanished. He was in his 40s, and one day he was just gone. No calls, no clues, no goodbye. That room felt wrong even before that happened, but after, it felt almost cursed. There was also this gross upstairs bathroom split into two little sections, sink in one, toilet in the other. The tub had this old curtain that always made me feel like somebody was standing behind it. Like if I pulled it open, I'd catch someone who wasn't supposed to be there. But the worst room, no contest, was the old upstairs kitchen. Nobody used it anymore. It had this stale, sour smell, and the floor always felt tacky under your feet. My brother had a ginger cat that lived up there for a while. Sweet cat, but at night it would yowl in this awful way, like it was warning everyone about something. And then one day it just died. No illness, no slow decline, just gone. That kitchen had two rooms connected to it. On the left was this makeshift dressing room stuffed with old clothes, like old. Coats, dresses, things that looked like they belonged in another century. There were even uniforms that reminded me of wartime photos you see in history books. On the right was the room I hated the most, a space filled with grave candles, like the kind people leave in cemeteries, glass jars, wax. that faint, dusty scent of dried flowers. The whole kitchen area smelled like old fabric, mothballs, and something else I still can't put a name to. So, one afternoon, Maddie and I decided to explore up there. We went into the left room first, the one packed with the clothes. We were doing that kid thing where you touch everything even though you know you shouldn't, whispering and giggling and daring each other to open another drawer. We were digging through old outfits and strange little antiques, half fascinated, half nervous. And then, bam! The kitchen door slammed. Not a gentle close, not a breeze. A slam that made both of us jump like someone had just shouted in our faces. We froze, and right after that, we heard the key. The sound of metal turning in a lock. Fast, over and over. Like someone was standing on the other side, hurried and angry, trying to lock it properly, trying to make sure it caught. We ran to the door and yanked the handle. It wouldn't open. We screamed, we cried, like real, panicked, ugly crying, because we weren't playing anymore, and we knew it. We were yelling for our parents, for anyone downstairs, and the worst part was realizing how far away they felt. Everyone was in the living room below, talking and laughing, and we were up there in that dead kitchen, locked in like we'd been put away. I don't know exactly how long it was. In my head, it felt like forever. If I'm guessing now, maybe a couple minutes. But when you're a kid and you're terrified, time stretches. It becomes this thick, awful thing. And then, just like that, the door opened. Not with a fight, not with force, just a simple twist, and it swung like it had never been locked at all. We stopped crying for half a second because our brains couldn't even process it. There was no one in the kitchen. No footsteps. No shadow moving away. No adult acting confused. Nothing. Just the stale air and that dim, disgusting kitchen staring back at us like it had done nothing wrong. And Maddie and I didn't hesitate. We bolted down the stairs so fast I almost slipped, and we ran straight into our parents, sobbing, trying to explain through hiccups that someone had locked us in. But of course, no one had. I've only told this story to a couple people, my partner and my brother, mostly because it sounds like the kind of thing people roll their eyes at. And honestly, I get it. I don't have proof. I can't rewind time and show you. All I can offer is the memory and how clear it still feels in my body. Even now, just talking about that upstairs kitchen makes my skin tighten. Like my nervous system remembers it before my brain even finishes the sentence. I've got a few more stories from that house, 2 or 3 at least. And there's one I've been saving because it's the most personal and the most messed up. And I already know it's the one people will least believe. But this one is real to me. Because I still remember the sound of that lock turning. Fast, frantic, deliberate. Like something upstairs didn't want us leaving. So, I've never been the kind of person who grew up seeing ghosts or having those obvious horror movie moments. Most of my life I've been pretty skeptical, pretty grounded. But there are a few things that happened, little pockets of time, that still sit with me, like a pebble in a shoe you can't shake out. The first one was when I was about 13. I was staying over at my aunt's place with my cousin and a friend, just the 3 of us crammed into the same bedroom, giggling and talking like kids do when they should be asleep. My aunt's house was surrounded by these tall walls, like the kind that make you feel tucked away from the world. Safe. Sealed in. We had the window open because it was warm, and the room had this soft, nighttime glow, street light spilling in, maybe a porch light outside, something like that. And then we saw it. A shadow moved across the wall. Not like a flicker from a car passing by, not like tree branches shifting. It was shaped like a person, like a man's silhouette, and it moved the way a person moves when they're walking, steady and casual, like someone just strolling through the yard. The three of us went dead quiet. You know that kind of silence where nobody even wants to breathe too loud? I remember staring at my cousin like, "Are you seeing this too? Please tell me I'm not alone in this." We didn't hear footsteps. We didn't hear a gate. We didn't hear anyone talking outside. And as far as we knew, there weren't any men there that night, just my aunt and us. We never figured it out. To this day, we'll bring it up sometimes, and all we can do is shrug and get goosebumps all over again. Then, a few years later, late teens, I had another moment that felt different. Less spooky, more unsettling. I was out at night with two friends, waiting at a bus stop. It was one of those nights where the street feels too quiet, like the air is holding its breath. And then a car pulled up in front of us. A police car. At first I thought, okay, maybe they're checking on us. But when the officers got out and started talking, something about them didn't sit right. Their tone was off. Their questions were weirdly personal. The way they looked at us made my stomach tighten. The three of us had heard stories, enough stories, to know that sometimes a uniform doesn't automatically mean safety. And then, this man appeared. It's so strange to describe because it wasn't dramatic. He didn't come running in like a superhero. He just stepped out from the shadows nearby, like from behind a tree or a signpost, and walked right up like he belonged there. Like he'd been there the whole time, even though he absolutely hadn't. He started talking to us, and he spoke to the officers too, calm but firm. Not aggressive, just present, grounded. He stood close enough that I suddenly felt less exposed, and almost immediately, the cops backed off. They got into the car and drove away like they'd lost interest. I remember turning to look at the man, ready to thank him, but this is the part that messes with me. He was already gone. Like he'd vanished into the night the second the car pulled off. We scanned the sidewalk, the street, the little patch of trees. Nothing. No footsteps fading, no figure walking away. I'm not someone who throws spiritual explanations at everything, but that night planted something in me. This tiny, stubborn thought. What if that man was sent to protect us? Not in a cheesy way, just what if? My family, though, my mom and my grandmother especially, they've had experiences that are harder to explain away. She'd be sitting there, and suddenly she'd hear it. Shouting, angry voices, this crashing noise like dishes being hurled across the kitchen. Sometimes it sounded like it came from her bedroom, where my grandpa used to sleep too. And every single time, when she'd rush in, heart pounding, bracing herself, everything would be normal. Plates stacked neatly, nothing on the floor, not a single broken thing. She always tells it like she's not trying to convince anyone. She's not dramatic about it. It's more like she's tired, like it's something she has to live with. And I'll be honest, their marriage wasn't gentle. It wasn't healthy. So hearing her describe those angry sounds after he was gone always made my skin prickle in a way I can't fully explain. My mom has her own stories too, from when she was growing up on a farm. She told me that some nights, when she'd be lying in bed, she could see straight into the kitchen because her bedroom door would be left open. And she'd watch this light, like a small, floating glow, start in the kitchen and drift toward her room. Not a flashlight beam, not a car headlight, a little orb of light, moving like it had intention. And every time, it would reach the doorway and just blink out, like it refused to cross that threshold. After my grandpa passed, my mom also started having weird experiences at my grandma's house, things that made her avoid staying overnight. The one she talks about the most is this buzzing sound, like a fly trapped right near her ear all night long. Imagine trying to sleep with that, your nerves just getting sanded down hour after hour. She'd turn on the light, sit up, check the room. Nothing. No bug. No source. Just silence until she'd lie back down, and then the buzzing would start again. Over time, she got so uncomfortable that she stopped visiting as much. because if she went, she'd have to stay the night, and she didn't want to. And then, there was something that happened to me. This was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. My husband and I were going through a rough patch. Just a lot of fighting, tension hanging in the house like smoke you couldn't air out. One night, we were asleep, and I woke up suddenly to the sound of something, this loud burst right in my ear. Not the ear facing him, the other one, the ear exposed to the room. It didn't sound like a bang across the house. It sounded close, intimate, like someone had leaned in and hit the air beside my ear. I sat up so fast my heart felt like it slammed into my ribs, and I knew it wasn't part of a dream. My sleep has always been light, and this felt like something intruding into the real world. I was terrified, but I didn't wake my husband. I didn't want to startle him or have him dismiss it in that sleepy, annoyed way people do when they don't understand something. So I just stayed awake. I looked around the room, checked the corners, stared at the shadows like they might rearrange themselves. Then I grabbed my phone and scrolled mindlessly for almost an hour, forcing myself to stay awake because I felt vulnerable. Like falling back asleep would be inviting whatever that was to come back. When I finally told my husband later, he shrugged it off, said I must have been dreaming. He's always been the skeptic between us. Maybe a little less than he used to be, but still. And then, recently, I had this dream that shook me in a different way. In the dream, I was being haunted. That's the only word that fits. There was an entity, humanoid, but wrong. Its energy felt dark, heavy, almost hateful. Demonic is the word that kept echoing in my mind even after I woke up. I felt cornered, alone. And then, in the dream, I said the name of Jesus Christ, and instantly, the figure vanished, like someone turned off a screen, like it never existed. And I woke up with my heart racing, my whole body hot and tense, and this lingering feeling that it hadn't been just a dream. Not in the normal way. It felt real, like something had tested the door and then backed away the moment I called on my faith. I still don't walk around claiming I have all the answers. I don't. But when I stitch these moments together, the shadow at my aunt's house, the stranger who appeared when we needed him, the sounds my grandma hears, the lights my mom saw, the buzzing, the blow in my ear, and that dream that ended the second I spoke Jesus' name, it makes me wonder if the world is a little thinner in places than we like to believe. And honestly, I think part of me is still that skeptical kid, but another part of me can't forget what I felt. So, a friend of mine reached out one afternoon and said, "Hey, can you check something out for me?" It was her girlfriend's sister's place, already a little removed, already sounding like the kind of message you read twice before answering. She told me they'd been having these weird experiences in a house they'd just moved into. Not a place they'd grown up in, not even somewhere they'd spent much time before. It was the husband's family home, his late grandfather's place, passed down to him after the funeral. They'd only been there a few weeks, and apparently, whatever was happening was escalating. I agreed to come by. When I got there, they looked exhausted in that very specific way people look when they haven't truly rested in days. The wife, her name was Marina, did most of the talking at first, but her husband, Evan, would jump in every now and then like he was still trying to convince himself it was real. And listen, the stuff they described was unsettling. Over several nights, both of them had woken up at different times and claimed they weren't wearing what they went to bed in. One night, Marina said she woke up in her old hospital scrubs, like the ones she keeps folded in a drawer, not something she'd ever sleep in. Evan said he woke up once with nothing on at all. And here's the part that made them both go quiet. Neither of them woke up in the same room they fell asleep in. Then there was the refrigerator incident. They woke up one morning and the fridge door was hanging open, like someone had stood there and stared into it for a while, deciding what to grab, and then just wandered away. They ended up throwing out an entire load of groceries because everything had warmed up overnight. Marina told me she'd been feeling heavy, like her body was dragging behind her brain. One afternoon, she lay down around 1 or 2 p.m. for what she thought would be a short nap, and didn't wake up until late the next morning. Evan swore she'd gotten up a couple times for the bathroom, but she had no memory of it at all. Not a flicker. Nothing. Evan, meanwhile, had been getting headaches in the house, but not randomly. He could point to where they happened. Certain rooms made his head throb almost on cue, and the worst one, he said, was the downstairs sitting room, the same room where his grandfather had died. At that point, he'd convinced himself it was a haunting. He even called a local priest to bless the house. And according to them, it didn't help. If anything, it made things feel meaner, sharper. Then Marina told me about the bathroom. She said she'd gone in late one night to wash her makeup off, standing in front of the mirror with the sink light on. At first, it was normal. Then something shifted. She said her reflection didn't look like her, not fully. The expression was off. The timing was off too, like the reflection was moving a fraction of a second behind her. And right before she turned away, she swore she saw someone, some kind of figure, standing behind her in the mirror. That was the moment they decided they were done. They started making plans to move back into their apartment, because every time they stayed away from the house, they felt fine. Clear-headed, normal, like themselves again. But after the mirror thing, they said they heard more. A woman's voice late at night, muffled, distant, like it was coming through a wall. And from what was meant to be their future nursery, they both heard what sounded like quiet crying. They told me, dead serious, that the blessing must have antagonized whatever was in there. They were at a loss. So that's where I came in. Downstairs, in the sitting room, the one tied to the grandfather's death, the windows were strange. They looked like windows, but they were double layered and sealed in a way that didn't make sense, like they were never meant to be opened. The sills were caked with old residue, grime built up like the room hadn't been properly aired out in ages. I tried testing one and ended up scraping off this hardened strip of old adhesive, like someone had laminated the edges shut years ago. That set off alarms in my head immediately, because when a house can't breathe, the people inside it start doing things that look supernatural. I told them, "I think you might be dealing with carbon monoxide." They blinked at me like I just ruined their whole story. But I keep a carbon monoxide detector in my car for situations exactly like this. Call it habit, call it paranoia, call it experience. I went out, grabbed it, came back in, plugged it in, and it went off. Fast. Not a polite little beep, not a low battery chirp. It went off like it had something urgent to say. And suddenly, so much of their haunting snapped into focus. Carbon monoxide exposure can mess with your memory, your sleep, your perception. It can make you confused, exhausted, irrationally afraid. People do things they don't remember. They wander. They forget. They wake up in odd places. They make connections that feel real because their brain is desperate to explain the blank spots. The changing clothes thing? That can happen if you're up and moving around while not fully conscious. Sleepwalking, disoriented, impaired, and you don't remember any of it. The open fridge? Same idea. You might do it and never store the memory properly. The long sleep, the bathroom trips she couldn't recall, the specific room headaches Evan kept getting, those fit too, especially if certain areas had worse airflow or higher concentration pockets. I still did a full sweep, just to be thorough. I checked for anything electrical that could explain sensations. I looked for obvious structural issues, and yeah, I brought my usual equipment. I didn't catch anything that screamed paranormal. There were a few electromagnetic readings, but every one of them had a normal explanation once I followed the wires and appliances around. Even the mirror story, probably the creepiest part when I first heard it, has a real-world explanation that people don't talk about much. If you've ever stared at your own face in a mirror for too long under low, steady lighting, like with a candle nearby or warm bulbs, you can trigger a distortion effect where your brain starts editing what you're seeing. Features shift, expressions change. Your mind fills in blanks in a way that feels wrong. Marina had a candle on the sink, right next to the mirror. Combine that with poisoning and fatigue, and you get something that can feel like a waking nightmare. And here's the part that's a little uncomfortable, but important. Once two people are living in that altered state together, they can reinforce each other's interpretations without realizing it. They compare notes, they validate each other's fear, and suddenly it's not, we're both confused and sick, it's, something is doing this to us. They weren't lying, they were poisoned. I let them keep my detector. Those things are cheap compared to what they prevent, and honestly, every home should have one. No drama, no debate. They aired the place out, brought in proper detectors, and, last I heard, the haunting stopped. And I'll be honest with you, I love a good ghost story. I do. I'm not above getting chills in the dark like anyone else. So if you take anything from this, take this. Sometimes the creepiest stories aren't spirits at all. Sometimes it's something silent and invisible and completely real. Stay sharp. Get detectors. Ventilate your spaces. And yeah, leave room in your mind for mysteries. Just make sure you rule out the ones that can kill you first. So, let me tell you about a rental house I investigated a while back. One of those places that doesn't start out loud, but slowly gets under your skin. Two close friends of mine were living there. I'll call them May and Kay. Both of them had partners. May was dating a woman, and Kay had a boyfriend. And at some point, every single one of them had something happen in that house that they couldn't explain. The weird theme? They kept hearing things that sounded like each other. Like, Kay told me this one moment that really rattled her. She was home alone and swore she heard her boyfriend come in through the front door. Footsteps, the door noise, the whole routine. Then she heard him call her name, like he was standing right inside the entryway. So she goes downstairs, annoyed, thinking, okay, he's trying to mess with me. Nobody's there. But she still hears movement, like someone shifting around in a back room on the lower level. She walks toward it, expecting him to jump out and scare her, and there's just empty space. No boyfriend, no prank, just this awful feeling of being played with. Then there was a night May had me text her about later. She and her girlfriend were in bed when May heard what sounded like Kay and Kay's boyfriend having a full-blown fight. Like nasty, loud, vicious yelling. She told me she could make out insults, swear words, the kind of stuff that makes you sit straight up in bed. May throws the covers off, furious, ready to storm out and tell him to get out of the house. And when she checks, Kay is asleep in her room, dead asleep, completely peaceful. No argument, no boyfriend shouting, nothing. And Kay's boyfriend, he had his own story too. One night, he's downstairs when he hears May call out from the bathroom, asking him to run up and grab something from her dresser. Something personal. He didn't want to make it weird, so he grabs Kay, like, hey, can you do me a favor? Because he's trying to be respectful. Kay is confused and insists May isn't even home, that she's over at her brother's place. But he just heard her voice. Kay goes upstairs anyway, finds the exact item, walks down, and the bathroom is empty. Silent. No lights. No May. So when May asked me to come take a look, I went fast. I love residential investigations. There's something about stepping into someone's normal life and realizing the rules don't always hold. First thing I did, like always, carbon monoxide check. I don't mess around with that. If there's a physical explanation, I want it ruled out immediately. Nothing. Then I did a slow walkthrough with my EMF detector. May does investigations too, but she leans more spiritual than I do. She mainly wanted another set of eyes, someone who's naturally skeptical, someone who's going to challenge the story instead of feeding it. I got readings, higher than I expected in a couple spots, but nothing I could point to as a clear source. And I'll be honest with you, I prefer nighttime investigations. You get fewer distractions, fewer explanations. The house feels more honest. I also carry a bug detector. I usually keep that quiet because it can offend people, but I'm not interested in getting played. If someone's faking activity, I want to know. I found nothing. No devices, no obvious trick, no external factors that made me think anyone was staging this. That night, we did a spirit box session. Not the kind where you force meaning into every little noise. I'm careful about that. But I heard a few things that stuck. I got something that sounded like K, then something like May, and then the word doctor. And then came the part I still think about when I'm alone in my own house. I slept on their pull-out couch. I wasn't even asleep yet. It was around 1:10 a.m., and I was reading on my tablet with the brightness turned low. The basement door was maybe 10 feet away, and in the quiet, I heard it open. You know that slow, heavy creak old doors make? The kind that feels 10 times louder at night? That's what it sounded like the house wanted me to hear it. And then, out of nowhere, clear as day, I hear a voice say, "Hey, come here." Not a garbled whisper, not a half sound. It sounded close, intentional, like someone standing just inside the doorway. Every hair on my arms lifted. I'm not exaggerating. My body reacted before my brain could talk me out of it. And yes, I got up. I know. But that's who I am. If I'm there to find the truth, I'm not going to hide under a blanket pretending I didn't hear it. I walked over, turned on my phone's flashlight, and stood at the top of the basement stairs. The air felt wrong, thicker almost. I stepped down onto the first stair, and the basement door swung shut behind me. Then I heard the lock, that sharp, final click. I spun around and tried the handle, locked. I started banging on it, hard, but after a few seconds I stopped and did the smartest thing I could do in that moment. I called May on my phone and told her, very calmly, to come open the basement door. While I was waiting, on the other side of that door, I heard something I can only describe as a whispery little laugh. Not loud, not dramatic. A thin, breathy cackle, like whatever was there was amused that it worked. May opened the door a minute later, and I came out trying to play it cool, but I didn't sleep after that. I just stayed awake, thinking about how certain things don't fit neatly into a box. When I left, I told May and Kay I'd come back if they wanted to investigate further. They tried a cleansing. It didn't help. So eventually, they moved. And the part that still sticks with me, since leaving that place, neither of them, or their partners, have reported anything else. Like the whole thing was tied to that house, or whatever was inside it. So yeah, that one still sits with me. Anyway, please take care of yourselves this week, all right? Stay grounded, stay observant, and if something feels off, don't ignore it. Be safe out there. You know what's funny? For as long as I can remember, people have told me I look just like my grandpa. My hair, my eyes, even the way I smile. They'll pause sometimes, like they're seeing him and me at the same time. I never really got to know him. He passed away not long after I was born. Cancer. The way my family tells it, he held on as long as he could while my mom was pregnant. Like he was determined to meet me first. Like he had one last thing to do before he let go. There's only one picture of us together. I'm tiny, newborn tiny, and he's holding me like I'm something fragile and sacred. And his face, I don't know how to explain it. His smile isn't forced. It's not the kind you do for a camera. It's calm, almost relieved. Like, for a moment, whatever pain he was carrying didn't get to touch him. I grew up in a Christian home. Faith was just part of the air in our house. But it wasn't the kind of faith that made me scared of people. My family always taught me to love, even when someone believed differently, even when I didn't understand them. I've carried that with me. But my childhood itself? It was complicated. My parents split when I was still a baby, and because they were both young and trying to figure life out, I bounced around a lot. My mom's place, my dad's place, my grandma's house. Different rooms, different routines, different versions of home. And still, I never felt as alone as I probably should have. It's hard to put into words, but I always felt like someone was close. Not in a scary way, more like a steady presence. Like there was someone walking a half step behind me, quietly making sure I didn't fall apart. When I was a kid, my anxiety got intense. Panic attacks that would come out of nowhere, like my body was ringing an alarm and I couldn't find the off switch. As a teenager, depression found its way in too. But even then, even on the worst days, I still had that strange feeling that I wasn't completely by myself. Until I wasn't sure anymore. Early in high school, things got really dark for me. I barely slept. I cried constantly. Quiet, exhausting crying that feels like it lives in your bones. I started thinking, I don't know if I can keep doing this. And what scared me most wasn't even the sadness. It was that the comforting feeling I'd always had, that someone's with you, seemed to disappear. So I started praying. Not fancy prayers, just honest ones. The kind you whisper into your pillow because you don't know what else to do. I asked God for a sign, for peace, for anything that felt like I wasn't drifting out to sea alone. And then this one weekend in the spring, my grandma asked if I could help her out with something. She needed to pack up a few boxes in the barn, some old storage, some things she'd been avoiding going through. And she wanted help in my grandpa's workshop too. I hadn't spent much time in there before, not really. It was one of those places that still felt like him, and that can be hard to step into when someone's gone. But that day, she'd cleaned it up, organized it, like she was trying to breathe in there again. When she opened the door and flicked on the lights, I swear, something happened in my chest. Warmth. That's the closest word I have. Like my whole body exhaled at once. The air felt different, lighter, almost gentle. And all of a sudden, I didn't want to leave. I just stood there, taking it in like I'd been thirsty and didn't know it. I asked my grandma what she needed help with, and she said, "There's a light in here that won't turn on, and I can't figure out why." That's what brought us there, a single, stubborn light. The thing is, my grandpa, his name was Gramps Ray, was an electrician. He wired that whole workshop himself back when he built it. So for a light to not work in his space, it didn't make sense. My grandma was genuinely confused. So we got to work. She started boxing up things at a slow, careful pace, like each item held a memory with sharp edges. And I started tracing wires. I followed every line I could see, checking corners, looking for a hidden switch, a loose connection, anything. I was convinced there had to be some clever little trick he'd built in. Hours went by. We never found the switch. That light never turned on. But something else did. While I was searching, I started finding pieces of him. Little artifacts tucked in drawers, shelves, old tins. A playlist scribbled on a scrap of paper. Tools arranged in that particular way someone does when they know exactly what they're doing. Random band stickers I actually liked. Old hobby stuff that matched things I'm into now. And it hit me so hard, I had to stop and just stand there. I remember thinking, we would have been friends, not just family, friends. Like, if cancer hadn't stolen those years, we would have had the kind of bond you don't even have to explain to people. And the weirdest part is, that heavy fog I'd been living under, it started to lift. Not all at once, not like magic, but like a door cracked open and fresh air finally got in. I walked out of that workshop feeling renewed, like my prayers had been answered, just not in the way I expected. Because the sign wasn't the light turning on. The sign was the way I felt standing in that room, the way peace washed over me without me forcing it, the way my heart settled, like it was being reminded, you're still held, you're still watched over, you're still not alone. Even now, my mom gets emotional around the time he passed. Sometimes she'll look at me for a second too long, and her eyes get glassy. She says I remind her of him so much it almost feels unfair, like she misses him and sees him at the same time. And honestly, it's an honor. To carry a face that makes people remember someone good. To feel like a legacy didn't end, it just changed shape. And to believe, deep down, in the quiet places, that Gramps Ray might still be walking beside me, not as a ghost story, but as something gentler. Like love that didn't leave, just became invisible. So I live down in southern Illinois, not too far from the Missouri line. It's one of those towns that's big enough to have everything you need, but it's not a city, and it's definitely not out in the sticks either. Just comfortable. This happened on a normal day. I just pulled into my driveway, and the way I parked, I was facing straight toward my backyard. We've got this white fence back there. You know the kind, where you can see right through it. It's not for privacy at all, more like a polite little boundary that says, this is where the yard ends. Along the fence are a few shrubs, nothing fancy, and there's a small back porch and a deck. And the backyard really is pretty. There's this flowering tree in the back, more of a pink bloom than anything, and it only shows off for a short time each year. I'd been looking forward to it, so I was kind of just sitting there for a second, taking it in. I took my glasses off to wipe them on my shirt, because, that's what we all do even though we probably shouldn't. And I want to be clear, I'm not blind without them. I just can't make out fine details far away. But here's the thing. I was only maybe 10 or 12 feet from the fence line when I saw movement. Something darted out from behind one of the shrubs and shot toward the underside of the deck. At first, my brain tried to do the normal thing. Cat, raccoon, possum, whatever. But immediately, I knew it didn't move like any of those. Because it wasn't on 4 legs. It ran on 2. And not in that awkward, animal briefly standing up way. No. This was a full-on sprint. Upright, balanced, like a tiny person making a break for cover. And I know that space under the deck. It's low, ridiculously low. Years ago, my cat squeezed her way under there, and I spent forever trying to coax her out. I actually had to pull up part of the decking to get her back. So I'm telling you, it's not a space a person could just crawl under. Not a normal-sized one, anyway. What I saw was pale-skinned. Not fur, not feathers, skin. And I could tell it had clothes on, like it was dressed, not just some bare creature. The best way I can describe it is, it looked like a very small man. Proportioned like a man, not like a child or a doll or anything weirdly shaped. Just tiny. Maybe a little over 2 feet tall. And I swear it had hair on its head. And this is the part that makes me feel ridiculous saying it out loud, but I'm being honest. My gut reaction was that it even had a bit of facial hair, like a shadow of a beard or something. I just froze, because my mind couldn't file it away into any normal category. After it disappeared under the deck, I leaned forward and tried to look, but you can't see much from that angle. The deck blocks most of the view, and the shadows under there make it worse. I moved a little, tried to get a better look from the side, but still, nothing clear. And then I heard it. Breathing. Not a little sniffing noise like an animal, more like heavy breathing. Like it was winded, almost like panting, but not in a dog way, in a human way. Like something had just run hard and needed a second. I stood there, feeling my heart thumping, and I did the dumbest thing. Well, maybe not dumb, but it felt dumb. I quietly spoke toward the deck. Just a soft, "Hey, are you okay?" Like that made any sense at all. So I backed up, went inside, and shut the door behind me like I could lock the whole moment away. I didn't sleep great that night, I'll tell you that. And I've never seen anything like it again. But every once in a while, when that tree blooms and I'm looking out back, I think about how it moved, how clearly it ran on 2 legs, and I get that same cold little feeling in my chest. Because I still can't explain what I saw. Okay, so I've never really known how to talk about this without sounding a little ridiculous, but I'm just going to tell you the way it's always been for me. Ever since I was a kid, I'd hear someone call my name. Always a woman's voice. Sometimes it almost sounded like my mom, but not quite. Like the voice was borrowing her tone for a second, and then slipping back into something else. It never sounded exactly the same twice, but it always had that same familiar softness to it. And it only ever happened when I was alone. So for years I just told myself, okay, cool, my brain is being weird, moving on. And honestly, I did move on. I didn't tell anyone. I ignored it. I got used to it in the way you get used to a creaky floorboard or a neighbor's dog barking at night. Then there was the missing things problem. Stuff would vanish and then reappear right where I swear I'd already looked. Like I'd tear apart a drawer for my keys, give up, and then 2 days later, boom, sitting right there like it never left. I blamed myself. I'm absent-minded. I craft a lot. I lose track. Easy explanation. Except, it started to feel less like forgetfulness and more like being gently messed with. A few years back, my friend said something strange happened when we were on the phone. She told me she could hear another woman's voice behind mine, like someone standing next to me trying to talk over me. She couldn't make out the words, just the presence of it. I didn't hear a thing on my end. I laughed it off like it was my phone glitching, but it stuck with me in that itchy little corner of my brain. And then there was this tiny bottle I had, like a little glass vial with a cork. I used it for odds and ends, except it would disappear and come back with new little offerings inside. Bits of thread, scraps of faux fur from my dog's brush, stuffing from the little plushies I sew. Nothing dramatic, just stuff. like someone was borrowing it and returning it with a souvenir. I kept it in a side table drawer and started checking it all the time, like I was trying to catch the world in the act. I even thought for a while, maybe my husband was pranking me. But he's not really that type. He's more forget to text back than commit to an elaborate haunting. So again, I ignored it. Fast forward to recently. I'm staying with my parents for a bit, just one of those in-between seasons of life. My mom and I are sitting in the living room, talking about nothing and everything, and I hear it. Clear as day, right by my ear. A voice says my name, plain as anything. And I just freeze. I look straight at my mom and I go, "Did you hear that?" And she goes, "Someone saying your name?" And I'm like, "Yes, exactly that." And she nods and says she heard it too. Listen, this was the first time in my entire life that it happened and someone else confirmed it. No one else was in the house. The TV was on, so we rewound what we were watching. Nothing. Not the show, not a weird sound effect, not the neighbors, just that. And in the most on-brand way possible, I still tried to shrug it off. Like, okay, not dealing with that right now. But it didn't stop there. I've got a friend who sometimes stays on call with me overnight, just on Discord, like background company while we sleep. I use a little desk mic for streaming, and sometimes Discord picks it up instead of my headset. And I'm like, what? No, I'm a light sleeper. If someone breathes too hard near my door, I wake up. He tells me he hears me snoring. Great, love that for me. But also hears my door open, and then hears a little girl talking. And he swears it sounds exactly like my sister's voice, like she's playing or chatting to herself. He couldn't understand the words, but it was loud enough that he couldn't believe I didn't wake up. So I ask my sister the next day, and she's like, no. She's not getting up in the middle of the night. She's half asleep until the last possible second in the morning and does most of her routine downstairs anyway. Which made my stomach do that slow little flip. But still, here's the thing. I didn't feel threatened. That's what's weird about it. Nothing about it felt angry. It felt present, curious, maybe even kind of playful. Then a couple nights later, I wake up to my dog's kennel door slamming open so hard it smacks the wall. It scared me so bad I swear my soul briefly left my body. My dog was in bed with me, and he snapped awake, stared at the kennel like he was seeing something I couldn't, and then crawled under the bed to hide. And I just sat there blinking in the dark like, okay, cool, great. And I went back to sleep. Because what else do you do at like 3 a.m.? Start a TED Talk with the air? A few days after that, I watched my bedroom door open by itself. Like I heard the latch click, and the door slowly swung inward. No one was home, just me. The puppy was in the kennel while I was getting ready for work. That was the moment I finally went, all right, fine, I'll play. So I downloaded one of those apps that records sounds in your room while you sleep. I figured worst case, it's nothing. And best case, it's something creepy and fun, and I get a spooky little story out of it. The recordings were unsettling in a quiet way. Footsteps, light like someone pacing in socks. Knocking that sounded like something tapping wood. And the one that really got me was this small sound, like a kid gasping, just once, like they'd seen something surprising. None of it is like movie-level proof. I'm sure someone could explain it if they tried hard enough. Houses make noise, apps glitch, audio gets weird. But when it's layered on top of years of hearing my name, losing things, other people hearing voices around me, it starts to feel less like coincidence and more like a pattern. So at this point, I kind of decided, If I really do have some kind of ghostly housemate, I'm just going to name her B, like Beatrice, but softer, and let her do her thing. Because honestly, if it's real, and not just my brain playing tricks on me, then I guess I have a weird little companion. A quiet, mischievous presence that likes to call my name and borrow my stuff and stand too close to microphones. And if it's not real, then at least I get to enjoy the mystery. Either way, I'm going to keep recording, and if I ever catch something that sounds like more than a tiny gasp or a couple knocks, something unmistakable, I'll share it. And if you have any theories that aren't just, it's the wind, I'm listening. I like spooky stuff. I like wondering. And apparently, something out there likes me enough to keep saying my name. Okay, so I was dog sitting this weekend for my mom's friend, and I do dog sitting pretty often on the side, but this was my first time with this family and this house. About a week before the stay, my mom and I stopped by so I could meet the dogs. Sweet, friendly, totally normal. But a couple nights after that, I had this really strange dream about the house. I can't even remember what happened in it now. I just remember waking up with that gross, unsettled feeling, like, why do I feel weird right now? And I'm gonna be honest, this is an older house, the kind with creaky stairs and that history in the walls vibe. So during the stay, I'd been leaving the back door cracked open sometimes because the weather was really nice, and it made it easy for the dogs to wander out into the yard whenever they wanted. Then last night, things got weird. There was a storm earlier, so the dogs were already a little clingy. At one point, they followed me into the bathroom like, yeah, we're staying with you. When I walked out with one of them, this little girl dog who's usually pretty confident, she suddenly stopped and stared toward the stairs. And not just a quick glance either. Like, she kept looking up the staircase, then pacing a couple steps away, then turning back and staring again like she was tracking something. And I'm standing there thinking, please don't do this to me. Because the only thing my brain could focus on was, what if someone came in through the back door earlier? My boyfriend, Eli, was already on his way over after work, but he was still like half an hour out. So I did the only thing my scared brain could handle. I went back into the bathroom and waited. I literally stayed in there with the dogs until he got there, because it felt like the safest place in the house. When Eli arrived, I let him in and we did a full search. Upstairs, downstairs, closets, the whole thing. Nothing. No open windows, no weird signs, nobody hiding. It was quiet. We were starving after that, so we left for a bit and grabbed pizza. And honestly, once we got back, everything felt normal again. Like, okay, maybe the dog heard thunder echoes and I spiraled. So we're back, pizza eaten, and we're stretched out on the couch. But we're laying opposite directions, both on our phones, barely talking. And then, out of nowhere, the entire room lights up in this intense, clean white flash. Like someone took a professional indoor photo right in our faces. It was so bright it felt like it happened inside the living room. We both jerked up like, what the? And immediately we each assumed the other did it. Like, did you just take a picture? Nope, neither of us did. Eli grabs his phone and tries to recreate it with his camera flash, but his flash looked pathetic compared to what we saw. This wasn't a dim little phone flicker. This was a full room, quick white blast. And the storm had already passed by then. Plus, lightning usually has that bluish-purple tint, you know? This was white, and it didn't feel like it came through a window. It felt like it happened right there with us. I tried to be practical, so I texted the owner, like, hey, do you have any indoor security cameras or anything that flashes? And she was like, no, we don't have anything like that. So now we're just sitting there with zero explanation, both pretending we're fine while also not really wanting to look toward the stairs. A little while later, Eli texts me while we're sitting right next to each other, which tells you how tense it felt. He goes, "I hear something upstairs, like movement. I think someone might actually be up there. We should leave." We go out to the car and he's ready to just go back home, but I'm standing there thinking, I can't just leave the dogs. So I call my dad, he's a retired cop, and I ask if he can come over and check the house. But then I'm also like, I don't want him walking in alone if there really is someone inside. So we called the police. They came, they searched everything, every room, upstairs, downstairs, closets, the whole deal. And they found nothing. No one was there. After that, I basically insisted Eli stay the night because I was not about to be in that house by myself after all of that. And once he stayed, the rest of the night was calm. No more flashes, no more sounds, no weird dog staring contests with the staircase. But I'll tell you this, I'm usually not that paranoid when I dog sit. I've stayed in strangers' houses plenty of times. It just felt like too many odd things stacked on top of each other. The dream, the dog acting like something was upstairs, the flash, the noises, the way both of us felt that tension at the exact same time. Eli doesn't even believe in ghosts, and even he was like, nope. I asked the owner if they've ever had anything creepy happen there, and she said no, which, honestly, thank goodness. And also, thank goodness I'm leaving today. But I'm still stuck on that flash. Like, what even was that? Because everything else you can kind of explain away. The flash is the one thing I can't stop replaying in my head. So, I'm just going to say it out loud, the way I'd say it if you were sitting across from me at the kitchen table. I think my house is haunted. And the weird part is, I still don't even know what I mean when I say that. I grew up Christian, like from the beginning Christian. The kind where you're taught early to be careful about the spiritual realm, even if you don't fully understand what that means yet. As I got older, my faith kind of loosened. These days I'd call myself more agnostic than anything. I'm not out here trying to prove or disprove ghosts. I just want my family to feel safe in our own home. The first time anything happened was right before COVID, back when life still felt normal. My partner, her name's Marissa, shook me awake in the middle of the night. She was terrified, like wide-eyed, frozen terrified. She whispered that she'd seen the shadow of a man in the doorway. I jumped up and checked the whole house, closets, corners, the living room, even outside. Nothing. No broken window, no weird noises, no sign that anyone had been there. Marissa was pregnant at the time, barely sleeping, and we convinced ourselves it had to be that. Stress, exhaustion, your brain playing tricks. We laughed it off the next day, like we were closing a door on it. And for a while, that actually worked. For a couple years after that, I don't remember anything unusual. No shadows, no footsteps, no strange feelings. Then, within this past year, it started again. The moment that kicked it off, honestly, still messes with me because of the timing. Marissa and I were in our bedroom having a bad argument. One of those heated, ugly ones where you're both talking too loud and saying things you regret. And right in the middle of it, we heard it. Heavy footsteps. Not downstairs, not outside, above us, in the attic. It wasn't a creak. It wasn't the house settling. It sounded like someone pacing, slow and deliberate, like they had weight, like they were choosing where to step. Both of us just stopped talking, like somebody hit pause on us. Marissa leaned close and whispered, "Please, go check." I didn't want to. Every instinct in me was screaming, "Don't go up there." But I did it anyway because I'm a dad, and that's what you do. You go look, even when you don't want to. I climbed up, flashlight in hand, heart pounding like I was about to find someone hiding up there. Nothing. No person, no animal, no signs of anyone ever being there. Just insulation and stored junk and that stale attic smell. After that, months passed, and those footsteps would come back every now and then. Not constant, just enough to keep you on edge. Eventually, we started joking about it because sometimes joking is the only way to live with something you can't explain. We started calling it the guy upstairs. But the joke doesn't really land when you're lying in bed at night and you hear it again. Then there's this other piece, and I swear, this is the part I can't shake. One night, my younger brother stayed over. He's around the same age as my oldest kid, so all the kids were hyped, staying up a little later than usual. They piled into one of the bedrooms and started playing some little game they'd seen online, something like a yes-no spirit thing. I didn't even pay attention at first. It sounded like harmless kid stuff, like the kind of nonsense kids do when they're bored. A little bit later, Marissa and I were in the living room, and the lights started flickering. And then, all at once, every kid came flying out of that bedroom, crying, screaming, tripping over each other, full panic. They were all talking at once, trying to explain what happened, saying the lights in their room flickered too, right in the middle of the game. They were shaking, like they'd seen something they didn't have words for. And you know what? If it was just the lights in the living room, I could blame wiring. If it was just the kids, I could blame imagination. But it happened in both rooms, at the same time, and the fear on their faces was real. That wasn't pretend. Since that night, the atmosphere in our house has felt different, like something got invited in, whether you believe in that kind of thing or not. And the hardest part of all this is my youngest son, because now he sees things almost every day. He talks about shadow people like it's normal, like it's just another thing you deal with, like homework or bedtime. He's described a tall man in a hat more than once, and he's started giving them names, little names, kid names, like he's trying to make them less scary by turning them into something familiar. And that breaks my heart, because I don't know what to do with that. I don't want to brush him off and teach him that nobody believes him, but I also don't want to feed into something that could be fear or anxiety or nightmares. On top of that, we get knocking. Not inside the walls, on the windows. Sometimes it's light, like a tap-tap. Sometimes it's harder, like someone's knuckles hitting glass. We'll look, and there's nothing there. No neighbor kids, no branches, no animals, just empty dark outside the window. So yeah, that's where we're at. A house with footsteps overhead we can't explain, flickering lights that hit at the worst possible moment, a little boy naming shadows so he can sleep, and knocking on windows that makes your stomach drop every time it happens. And I know how this sounds, I really do, but I'm living it. And when you live it, the biggest question isn't even, is it real? It's, what do you do when the people you love are scared and you can't prove they're wrong? So, a little background, just so this all makes sense. I moved into this house back in October of 2019. At the time, my brother Evan owned it and lived here. I stayed with him for a couple years, and then he got married, bought a new place with his wife, and I just kind of kept living here. I rented from him for a while after that, and then earlier this year, February, I finally closed on the house myself, which is a big deal because I'm turning 40 this week, and I'm throwing a birthday party at my place on the 3rd. So this past weekend, I went into full-on panic cleaning before guests arrive mode. Like the kind where you're not just wiping counters, You're opening cabinets you haven't touched in forever, pulling things out of corners that have basically become part of the architecture. And honestly, it felt kind of satisfying. Like, okay, this is my house now. I should probably know what's in all these random spaces. Funny side note, I actually found the key to the backyard shed, the same shed my brother and I ended up breaking the lock off of shortly after I moved in. So, very on brand for us. Anyway, when I first moved in, I remember Evan joking, or maybe not joking, that there was a ghost in the house. I shrugged it off. I've lived here for years and never experienced anything weird. No cold drafts, no footsteps, no creaking doors at 3 a.m. Nothing. Until last Saturday. So there's this hidden pantry area in the basement, tucked under the front entryway. The door is blended into the wall so well that if it weren't for this random doorknob sticking out of nowhere, you'd never even know it was a door. And that door is always closed. Always. The water meter is right next to it, so I've been down there before to check the meter for the bill, and I don't remember it being open then. But on Saturday, I'm cleaning like a man possessed. I boxed up a bunch of old computer parts and cables that were cluttering my kitchen table, and I head down to the basement to stash the box away. I turn the corner, and the hidden pantry door is wide open. I'm not exaggerating when I say I got chills immediately. Like the kind that hit the back of your neck before your brain even has time to form a thought. Because here's the thing, that door does not swing open easily. It's fitted into the wall really tight. You have to give it a pretty solid pull to get it moving. So even if it somehow wasn't fully latched, which I'm pretty sure it was, it still wouldn't just drift open on its own. It's not that kind of door. I just stood there staring at it like, okay, no. Nope, absolutely not. But I forced myself to move. I put the box away, walked over, and checked it out like I was being very brave and normal. Nothing was out of place. No broken hinge, no weird draft, no fallen items, nothing. Just open. So I closed it. Then I opened it again just to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. Yup, still sticky. Still takes effort. Still very much a you have to mean it door. I stood there for a few seconds longer, every hair on my arms standing up. And then I did what I always do when I don't want to deal with something unsettling. I shook it off and kept cleaning. Later that night, things got even weirder. By then, I was a few beers in, feeling productive, feeling proud of myself. I had music blasting, something dramatic and old school, like it belonged in a movie, and I'm happily dusting, tidying, doing my thing. Around midnight, I step outside for a smoke. When I came back in, and my Roomba was running. Now, I don't have any timer set on the Roomba. I ran it earlier that day, sure, but afterward it was parked where it always parks, on its charger. And where is its charger? Directly above that hidden pantry door. I swear the same full-body, hair standing up feeling hit me all over again. That instant gut-level, something is off feeling. I shut the Roomba off and just kind of stood there, looking between the vacuum on its side and the little robot like it was going to explain itself. And I know what someone might say. Maybe the vacuum fell over and hit the Roomba and turned it on. Except it wasn't right next to it. It was several feet away, like not even close. Could the Roomba have bumped the vacuum and knocked it over? Sure, that seems possible. But the idea that the vacuum just toppled over and somehow activated the Roomba from that distance? That feels very unlikely. So yeah, that's the whole story. It's now a couple days later, and nothing else has happened since. I even went down to the basement again before telling anyone, and that hidden pantry door is still closed, like it never did anything at all. Which, honestly, somehow makes it creepier. So, I'm going to tell you something that still makes my stomach drop a little, even now. I'm 18, and I grew up way out in the woods in rural Maine. Still live up here, just not on that exact same piece of land anymore. But I know those kinds of woods. Thick trees, long driveways, the kind of quiet that feels like it has weight to it. As a kid, our house sat back on a big chunk of property, not too far from the coast, but far enough that at night it felt like the world ended at the tree line. When I was maybe 6 or 7, my brother and I started hearing my mom calling for us to come inside. Only, it wasn't normal. It would be loud, like sharp loud, and it never sounded like it came from the porch. It sounded like it was coming from behind the house, or even above it, like the voice was floating somewhere over the roofline. And every single time, we'd run inside, expecting her to be irritated or impatient, and she'd look at us like we had 2 heads and go, "I didn't call you." At first, we thought she was joking. Then we thought maybe she forgot. But it kept happening, on and off, for a long time. Long enough that we started treating it like weather. Like, oh, that again. And there were other little things too. Weird noises in the woods. Crunching footsteps when nothing was there. Branches snapping. Sometimes this faint whistling that didn't sound like a bird. Once in a while, there'd be a smell that hit me out of nowhere. Rank and sour, like something spoiled. But then you'd take 2 steps and it would be gone like it never existed. The creepiest part, though, wasn't any single sound. It was when the woods would go silent. Not peaceful silent. Not, "it's getting late" silent. I mean that dead, unnatural silence where it feels like even the insects have decided to shut up all at once. Like the entire forest is holding its breath. I learned to explain most of it away. Animals. Wind. My imagination. Kids get scared. Rural life is full of strange noises. But there was one thing I could never explain away, because it wasn't just a thought. It was a full-body event. Out of nowhere, I'd get this overwhelming terror, like I'd just stepped too close to the edge of something. And the feeling that I was being watched, so intensely it made my skin go tight. When that happened, I didn't look around. I didn't investigate. I didn't even think. I just ran inside as fast as I could, like my life depended on it. And I never looked back because I couldn't handle the idea of seeing something looking at me. And then there was the day I actually saw something. I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, somewhere around there. I can't pin it down exactly. I just know I was little enough that the world still felt half magic. Let me paint the yard for you, because it matters. Our driveway cut the space in front of the house, and to the right there was a wide lawn, some scattered trees, and this worn little swing set that squeaked when you kicked off. Behind that lawn was more forest. On the left side was a skinny strip of grass, and then woods again, with a couple little walking trails my family used. It was autumn, late enough that the trees were mostly bare. The ground was layered in dead leaves, that coppery brown blanket that makes every step loud. I was out by the swing set in the late afternoon, when the sun gets low and everything looks golden and a little sad, when I heard this massive crashing sound from the woods across the driveway, like something heavy moving through branches, like multiple limbs snapping at once. I turned my head, and I swear to you, I saw it. A polar bear. And immediately, my little kid brain didn't go, "That's impossible." It went, "Oh my God, a polar bear." Because I loved animals. I was the kind of kid who would get excited about seeing a weird bug. So my first impulse wasn't fear, it was wonder. It was this breathless, stupid excitement that made me feel like I'd been chosen by the universe to witness something incredible. So I ran. I sprinted over toward where that trail opened up around the bend in the trees. There was only a second, maybe 2, where the white shape was out of sight as I rounded the corner, and I was expecting to come around and see it again, closer this time. But the second I hit that opening, everything changed. The leaves on the trail exploded upward like something had kicked them from underneath. There was this frantic flurry, and suddenly a huge turkey came charging down the path toward me, gobbling like it was losing its mind. Not just walking, not just startled, charging. I froze for half a heartbeat because my brain couldn't fit the pieces together. And then I stumbled backward off the trail, scrambling out of the way so it wouldn't slam into me. The turkey barreled past in this chaotic rush of feathers and anger, and then it was gone, vanishing into the trees like it had never been there. And the polar bear? Gone. Just gone. I remember standing there in the leaves with my heart hammering and my throat tight, staring down that trail like the answer might come walking back out if I waited long enough. But instead, the woods just stared back at me, quiet again, like they'd reset. I ran inside and burst into the kitchen, out of breath, trying to explain it all at once. And of course, my family didn't believe me. Because how do you say, I saw a polar bear and then it turned into a turkey, without sounding like you're making it up? My brother, Eli, looked at me like I was insane. My mom kind of laughed in that gentle way adults do when they're trying not to scare you or encourage you. And eventually I stopped insisting, because the more you try to convince people of something unbelievable, the more you start sounding like you're convincing yourself. But here's the thing. Even now, years later, every once in a while, something happens that drags me right back to that day. It's not constant. It doesn't happen when I'm with people. It happens when I'm alone, driving at night on back roads, or outside doing chores like feeding our chickens when nobody's home. I'll see an animal, usually a deer, once it was a fox, and it'll look normal at first. Totally normal shape, normal movement. But then it'll stop, and it'll stare at me in a way that feels wrong. Like it's not just looking, like it's aware of me in a way animals usually aren't. Sometimes it's far off, half in shadow, and it'll tilt its head slightly, just watching. And something about the eyes will hit me like ice water, this strange, uncanny presence I can't put into words. And every single time, I get that same sickening rush of terror. Not nervousness, not creepy feeling. I mean bone-deep, body-screaming fear. Like if I stay where I am, something terrible will happen. Like I'm standing in front of my own death and my instincts are begging me to run. So I leave, immediately. I don't stare back. I don't try to prove anything to myself. I just get inside, lock the door, and wait until my heartbeat stops trying to punch through my ribs. And there are other things too. Little threads that make it harder to shrug off as coincidence. I'm not even someone who grew up believing in the paranormal. I'm not the kind of person who sees a shadow and calls it a ghost. But I can't shake the feeling that something was in those woods, and that maybe it didn't stay there. And I guess that's why I'm telling you this, instead of keeping it tucked away like a weird childhood memory. Because whatever happened that day, whatever I saw, whatever I thought I saw, it left something in me. A sense that there's a line in the woods you're not supposed to cross. A sense that something noticed me noticing it. And I keep wondering the same thing. Was it just a kid's imagination colliding with wildlife and fear? Or was that the first time something in those trees looked back? So, let me tell you about the weekend Ryan and I decided to go camping. Because to this day, I still get that little chill in my stomach when I think about it. We were bored, scrolling around for somewhere easy to drive to, and we landed on the Uwharrie National Forest. We're in North Carolina, so, look, we both know the stories. We've heard enough weird Appalachian stuff to be respectfully paranoid, but the Uwharries aren't technically part of the Appalachians, so we were like, okay, different woods, different vibe, we'll be fine. First night? Totally normal. Nothing spooky, just brutally cold. Like, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and makes every little sound feel sharper. We struggled to keep the fire going, and by around 4:30 or 5 in the morning, we finally gave up, crawled into the car, and drove home to warm up. We told ourselves we'd come back when the sun had a little more mercy. Second night was almost the same. Cold, quiet, mostly peaceful. Except this time, Ryan heard whistling. Just a few notes, drifting from somewhere out in the dark. We immediately did that thing where you try to be logical because the alternative is to panic. We figured it had to be other campers messing around. Still, it put us on edge. You know how it is. Once your brain notices something creepy, it starts filling in blanks you didn't even know were there. Then came the last night. We actually had a good time at first. We caught a handful of crawfish earlier in the evening, enough to justify a little makeshift seafood boil over the fire. It felt cozy for once. The kind of moment where you start thinking, okay, see? We were overreacting. This is fun. And then the neighbor campers packed up and left. Not long after that, while the pot was boiling, it started to rain. But here's the thing. The forecast said clear skies. So I'm already annoyed, right? Like, of course it rains the night we're trying to do the one cute campfire dinner. But then I look up, and the sky is absolutely packed with stars. I mean, a full-on glittering ceiling, bright and open. No clouds. Not even a thin haze. So now I'm confused. I'm standing there with rain tapping my jacket, staring up at this perfect sky like my brain can't make it make sense. I pulled up the weather radar, thinking maybe it was a tiny pocket passing over us. There was nothing. No storm nearby. No cloud cover. Nothing showing precipitation anywhere close. Like, not even in the general region. It was so wrong it made me laugh at first, like, okay, what is this? But the laugh didn't last long. We tried to shrug it off. We plated our food, acting casual, doing that forced normal thing, talking a little louder than usual, making dumb jokes, pretending our bodies weren't already tense. Then the rain stopped. And when I say it stopped, I mean it just cut off. Like someone turned a faucet. Everything got quiet. Not peaceful quiet, watching you quiet. The kind of silence where you suddenly realize you can hear your own breathing, and it feels too loud. Both of us got that same reaction at the exact same time. Hair standing up, shoulders tight, stomach dropping. That deep gut feeling that whispers, something is not right. And then, from out in the distance, we heard it again. A whistle. Clear as day. Not wind. Not an animal. Like a person doing it on purpose. And now the neighbors were gone, which made it so much worse. Because suddenly there was nobody left to blame it on. We pulled out and started driving, and the whole forest felt off. We passed several campsites that were definitely occupied. Cars parked, tents up, but not a single fire anywhere. And it wasn't late. It was like 9:30 at night. You'd expect at least somebody to have a lantern on, or a little glow, or something. Nothing. Then we passed a couple houses. Dark. Then a ranger station, also dark. Not a porch light, not a window light, not even that little someone's watching TV glow. It felt like we were driving through a dead zone, like the world was there, but nobody inside it. I remember gripping the door handle so hard my hand hurt, just staring out the window like I was expecting something to step out of the trees. Ryan kept his eyes locked on the road, jaw clenched. We barely spoke. And then, finally, we hit the edge of the forest, and it was like crossing an invisible line. We saw another car. We saw homes with lights on. Real life, normal, human lights. And I swear to you, I have never been happier to see strangers in my entire life. I wanted to roll the window down and yell, "Thank you for existing!" We laughed afterward, because once you're safe, your nervous system needs somewhere to put all that panic. But we also made an agreement right then and there. We are never staying out there at night again. Not us. Not ever. We went back the next day to pack up in daylight, thinking, okay, it'll feel different. And it did. Mostly. Until we were leaving and, like one last little jab, the car didn't start right away. It took 3 tries, 3 full cranks, before it finally turned over. And I know that could be nothing. Battery, cold, whatever. But in that moment, it felt personal. Like the woods getting the last laugh. So yeah. Bye, Uwari. You win.